This video will help you sleep and relax. But before we begin, I would like to know which city you're from and what time you're watching this. Now, subscribe to the channel, relax, and let's begin. I never believed in ghosts. That's important to understand up front. I was the person who'd roll my eyes when friends talked about energies or claimed they'd seen shadows move on their own. I had explanations for everything: drafts, imagination, coincidence. That all changed when I started working at the Underground. The Underground was this quirky cafe and shop in the basement level of an old building downtown. It had been renovated about 5 years ago, but the building itself dated back to the 1920s. When I first got the job, I thought the place was charming. Exposed brick walls, dim lighting with Edison bulbs, mismatched vintage furniture. The kind of place hipsters dream about. I'd been working there for about 3 weeks when I first noticed something off. I was wiping down tables after the lunch rush, and I swear I saw someone in my peripheral vision, a man in a plaid shirt, hunched over slightly, standing by the bookcase. When I turned my head, nobody was there. I brushed it off as a trick of the light, but then it happened again 2 days later, and again the following week. Always the same, a man in plaid, always at the edge of my vision, always gone when I looked directly. I mentioned it casually to my coworker Maya during a slow afternoon shift. "Oh, plaid man," she said with a shrug, like I'd just mentioned seeing a regular customer. "Yeah, we all see him eventually." That's when I found out I wasn't crazy. Or if I was, at least I wasn't alone. Every single employee had experienced something strange in that place. Maya saw shadows moving against walls. Our manager, Dan, swore he heard his name whispered when he was alone in the stockroom. The new barista, Jess, refused to close up alone because she said the lights would flicker whenever she did. About a month into working there, I witnessed something I couldn't explain away. I was restocking napkins at the counter when I noticed a spoon on table 7 slowly, and I mean painfully slowly, sliding across the surface. The table was completely flat. There were no windows in our underground space, no outside doors that could create a breeze. The AC wasn't even running that day because it was broken. I stood there frozen, watching this spoon move about 6 inches over the course of maybe 30 seconds. When I told Maya, she just nodded. The cutlery does that sometimes. Wait till you see the coffee mugs rearrange themselves on the shelf. The bathroom situation was the worst. We had 2 customer bathrooms and 1 employee bathroom at the very back, past the storage area. I hated that employee bathroom with every fiber of my being. The light switch was outside the door, and the bathroom itself was tiny, just a toilet and a sink crammed into a space that felt like a closet. The first time I used it, I felt like someone was watching me the entire time. When I came out, I swear I saw something duck around the corner. A dark figure, tall, with a face that seemed wrong somehow, too thin, features all stretched out. After that, I'd only use it if I absolutely had to, and I'd always turn the light on before entering and leave the door cracked open. My co-workers thought I was weird until Jess saw it too, a tall figure peering around the doorway in the pitch black, just watching. Then there was the storage cupboard next to that bathroom. Sometimes, in the middle of a quiet afternoon, we'd hear banging from inside it, like someone was pounding on the door with something heavy. It would last about 10 seconds, always exactly 10 seconds, and then stop. We checked every time, and the cupboard was always empty except for cleaning supplies. After about 2 months at the Underground, the weirdness started following me home. That's when I really got scared. It started small. I'd wake up feeling like someone had just left my bedroom. My cat would stare intently at empty corners. His fur bristled. I'd feel cold spots walking through my apartment. Then one morning, I woke up to find a framed photo of my family had fallen off the wall and smashed overnight. It was securely hung, and none of the other photos had moved. When I looked closer, I realized it was the only family photo I had where I was in it alone. A shot of me at my college graduation. The glass had broken in a strange pattern, like someone had pressed their hand against it until it cracked. I made the mistake of telling my boyfriend, Tyler, about the weird stuff at work. He was concerned but skeptical. "Old buildings make weird noises," he said, "and your mind plays tricks when you're tired." That night, I was lying in bed scrolling through my phone when I saw it, a face peering around my bedroom doorway. Not a normal face. It was distorted, with a long, stretched neck. It looked at me for maybe 2 seconds, then shot under my bed so fast I barely had time to scream. Tyler came running from the living room. He searched under the bed, in the closet, everywhere. Nothing. He thought I'd had a nightmare, but I was wide awake. I started recording voice notes about the experiences, partly to document them and partly because talking about it made me feel less crazy. When I played one back, there were voices in the background, whispers I couldn't make out. In another recording, I heard what sounded like a metal pan grating across stone and scratching noises like fingernails dragging across a ceiling. The worst part was the dreams, except they didn't feel like dreams. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to my bed shaking violently, not like an earthquake, more like someone was grabbing the foot of my bed and rattling it with inhuman strength. Then I'd see it, a tall, unclothed thing with pale skin standing at the foot of my bed. It would stare at me with those stretched out features, then jump off and run toward the door in this jerky, unnatural movement. The first time it happened, I convinced myself it was sleep paralysis, but then it happened again and again, and Tyler started having the same dreams. We'd wake up at the same time, both seeing the same thing, and it looked exactly like the long-necked thing I'd seen going under my bed in broad daylight. Last week, things escalated at work. I was closing with Maya, and we were both in the main cafe area. All the customers had left, and we were counting the register. Suddenly, all the chairs at once scraped backward, like someone had pulled each one out from its table. We both froze. Then the espresso machine turned on by itself, making this horrible grinding noise because there were no beans in it. Maya looked at me and said, "It's never been this bad before." I quit the next day. I couldn't handle it anymore. But quitting didn't stop what was happening at home. Yesterday was the breaking point. I was alone in my apartment, getting ready for a job interview. I'd been out of work for a week and was desperate to find something new. As I was putting on mascara, I felt something brush against my shoulder. In the mirror, I saw a hand, a grayish, too long hand with knobby fingers resting on my shoulder. I screamed and spun around. Nothing was there. But when I looked back at the mirror, I saw it in the reflection. The plaid man from the cafe standing behind me, only now I could see his face clearly. His eyes were just empty sockets and his mouth was stretched in this horrible grin that went literally from ear to ear. I ran out of the bathroom and grabbed my phone to call Tyler. As I was dialing, all the lights in my apartment went out. Then my phone died, even though it had been at 70%. The temperature dropped so fast I could see my breath. That's when the whispering started. It was coming from every direction at once, dozens of voices overlapping. I couldn't make out most of it, but I distinctly heard my name several times, and the phrase "should have stayed" repeated over and over. I ran for the door, but it wouldn't open. The knob turned, but it was like something was holding it shut from the other side. I was trapped. The bathroom door slammed shut, then immediately flew open again. The shower turned on full blast, steaming hot water filling the room with fog. Through the steam, I saw figures moving, dark shapes converging toward me. I screamed and threw myself against my apartment door again. This time it opened, and I fell into the hallway. I didn't stop running until I reached the building lobby. I'm writing this from Tyler's place. I haven't been back to my apartment. I'm too scared. I've tried researching the building where the underground is located, looking for deaths or tragedies that might explain what's happening. So far, I've found nothing concrete, just vague mentions of the building having been a doctor's office in the 30s before being converted to retail. The most terrifying part is that I feel like whatever was in that cafe, I brought it home with me. It attached itself to me somehow. Even now, sitting in Tyler's living room with all the lights on, I keep seeing movement at the edges of my vision. I keep feeling like someone's standing right behind me, breathing on my neck. Last night, Tyler's TV turned on by itself at 3 in the morning. blaring static at full volume. When we finally managed to turn it off, we found scratches on the screen, 3 long parallel lines like someone had dragged their nails across it. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to make it stop. All I know is that I should never have taken that job, and now I'm afraid I'll never be free of whatever followed me home from the underground. Story 2. I've held this in for so long, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar or can help me make sense of what's been happening to me since I was a kid. I've never been into the paranormal or anything like that. I was just a normal kid from a small town in Nebraska. But there's no other way to explain what I've seen. It all started when I was 7 years old. Our house wasn't anything special, just a simple 2-story home on the edge of town. I shared a bedroom with my 2 brothers, Sam and Ethan. Sam was 9 and Ethan was 5 at the time. My bed was positioned against the wall that connected to my parents' bedroom. The first night it happened, I remember waking up around 3 in the morning. I wasn't scared at first, just confused. There was enough moonlight coming through the window that I could make out shapes in the room. I saw what looked like a person standing near the foot of my bed. At first, I thought it was my dad checking on us. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it wasn't him. It wasn't anyone. The figure was completely dark, not just wearing dark clothes, but like a shadow with depth. It had a human shape, but no features I could make out, and it wasn't alone. There were others, 4 or 5 of them. They were walking slowly in a circle in the center of our bedroom. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would wake up my brothers. But they slept peacefully while these things continued their silent procession. I watched as one of them broke from the circle and walked toward the wall that separated our room from my parents'. Then, impossibly, it just passed through the wall like it wasn't even there. The others followed one by one. I pulled my blanket up to my eyes, too terrified to scream. On the other side of that wall, my mom had hung a picture of the Virgin Mary. Every time I saw these shadow people, I couldn't stop thinking about that picture like they were somehow connected to it. I didn't tell anyone what I saw that night. I figured it was just a bad dream. But it happened again the next night, and the night after that, always the same. The dark figures walking in a circle before passing through the wall. Sometimes they moved quickly, almost rushing. Other times they moved painfully slow, like they were dragging themselves across the floor. But they never made a sound. They never looked at me or my brothers. They just performed their ritual night after night. After about 2 weeks of this, I couldn't take it anymore. I was exhausted from not sleeping, jumping at every shadow during the day. My mom noticed how tired I was and asked what was wrong. I broke down crying and told her everything. To her credit, she didn't dismiss me. She looked concerned and asked if I wanted to sleep in their room for a while. I nodded, too embarrassed to admit how desperate I was to get away from whatever was happening in my room. That night, I slept on a little cot in my parents' room, right under that picture of Mary. I was nervous they would follow me, but nothing happened. I slept through the night for the first time in weeks. The relief was incredible. I stayed in their room for almost a month before my dad insisted I needed to go back to my own bed. I was terrified, but when I returned to my room, the figures were gone. They never came back, at least not in that house. For a few years, things were normal. Then, when I was 11, we moved to a different house across town. My dad got a promotion at work, and my parents were excited about the upgrade. It was a newer house with enough bedrooms for each of us boys to have our own, but Sam and I still shared out of habit. Everything was fine for the first 6 months. Then one night, I woke up feeling strange. I couldn't move a muscle, not my arms, legs, nothing, just my eyes. I'd had sleep paralysis before, but this felt different. The room was pitch black except for a faint glow coming from the corner. As my eyes adjusted, I saw something that still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. Standing beside Sam's bed was a tall white figure, not white like a person, white like bone or paper. It was at least 7 feet tall, hunched slightly to avoid hitting the ceiling. Its face, God, its face, it had this huge orange beak, like a massive deformed chicken. Its eyes were also orange, but not warm. They glowed with something that looked like anger or hunger. It was just standing there, watching Sam sleep. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything, but my body wouldn't respond. The thing didn't seem to notice me at all. It just kept staring at my brother. Eventually, I squeezed my eyes shut and started counting in my head, trying to calm down. When I got to 50, I managed to pull my blanket over my head with tremendous effort. I stayed that way for what felt like hours, sweating and trembling under the covers. When I finally got the courage to peek out, the figure had moved. It was now standing near the wall, still facing Sam's bed. As I watched, it began to fade into the wall itself, its white form disappearing inch by inch until it was gone completely. The moment it vanished, I could move again. I jumped out of bed and turned on every light in the room, waking Sam up in the process. He was pissed at me, but I didn't care. I spent the rest of the night sitting up in bed, afraid to close my eyes. The next morning, I tried to tell my mom what happened. She looked worried and mentioned that I'd had sleep paralysis before, but this wasn't like my usual episodes. With those, I'd see shadowy figures or feel a weight on my chest. This was completely different, more solid, more real, and the eyes, those angry orange eyes. There was intelligence there, purpose. It wasn't just a hallucination. I didn't see the white figure again, but I started sleeping with a nightlight after that. Sam teased me mercilessly, but I didn't care. Whatever that thing was, it was watching my brother, and that scared me more than any embarrassment could. Life went on, and I started to convince myself that maybe my mom was right. Maybe it was just an especially vivid episode of sleep paralysis. By high school, I'd mostly forgotten about the shadow people and the white figure. I had normal teenage problems to worry about: grades, girls, trying to figure out what to do after graduation. Then, 2 years ago, everything changed again. My mom was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. It hit us all hard, especially my dad. Mom had to spend a lot of time in the hospital for treatments. The house felt empty without her there, like the heart had been ripped out of our home. One night, about 3 months into her treatment, I was alone in the house. Dad was staying overnight at the hospital, and my brothers were both away at college. I was in my room trying to study when I felt a sudden chill. It wasn't a physical cold, more like a feeling of dread washing over me. Something told me to check my parents' bedroom. I walked down the hall and stopped at their door. I didn't want to go in, but I couldn't explain why. My hand shook as I turned the knob. The room was dark and still, nothing out of place. Mom's side of the bed was made up perfectly, untouched since she'd been admitted to the hospital. Dad's side was rumpled from where he'd slept the night before, but something was there. I couldn't see it or hear it, but I could feel it. A presence, heavy and suffocating, like the air itself had thickened. It was concentrated around my mom's side of the bed, hovering there. The only way I can describe it is that it felt like death itself. Not violent or angry, just patient, searching, waiting. I backed out of the room and slammed the door. I didn't sleep that night, or the next. Every night when I came home, I could feel that presence in their room, getting stronger each time. I started avoiding that part of the house entirely. For weeks, this went on. I didn't tell my dad. He had enough to worry about with Mom's treatments. Then suddenly one night, the presence was gone. I walked past their room and felt nothing. The relief was incredible. I actually laughed out loud, thinking maybe I'd been imagining things because of stress. 2 days later, we got the call from the hospital. Mom had taken a sudden turn for the worse. By the time we got there, she was gone. Standing beside her hospital bed, looking at her body, I remembered the presence in her room at home. It had vanished right before she died, like it had found what it was looking for, like death had been waiting in our house, searching for her, and finally found her at the hospital. I've tried to move on with my life since then. I finished school, got a job, even started dating someone, normal stuff. But last week, something happened that made me write this all down. I was at my apartment doing dishes after dinner when I felt it again, that same heavy, suffocating presence. But this time, it was different. The presence I felt when Mom was sick was cold but neutral, like a natural force doing what it needed to do. This was malevolent evil. It filled my tiny kitchen with such intense hatred that I dropped a plate and it shattered on the floor. The presence didn't last long, maybe 30 seconds, but it was enough. I've felt it 3 more times since then, always stronger, always closer. Last night, I woke up at 3 in the morning to find my bedroom door open, even though I know I closed it before going to bed. The presence was in the doorway, invisible but unmistakable. I don't know what's happening or why these things are following me. The shadow people when I was 7, the white figure when I was 11, the presence before my mum died, and now this new evil. Are they connected? Is something coming for me the way it came for my mother? I'm writing this down because I'm scared, really scared. Whatever this is, it feels like it's building to something. I've started keeping the lights on all night. I've tried sage, crosses, prayers, anything I can think of. Nothing helps. If anyone has experienced anything similar or has any advice, please let me know. I don't know how much longer I can handle this. I keep wondering if the shadows I saw as a child were somehow warning me about what was coming for my mum, and now for me. I can't shake the feeling that something is closing in, getting ready to reveal itself fully. Last night, I felt a cold breath on the back of my neck as I was writing this. I spun around, but nothing was there. Just empty air, but I know better now. Nothing is ever really empty, and whatever has been watching me all these years is getting tired of hiding. Story 3. I've never been one to believe in ghosts. At least that's what I told myself growing up. But when unexplainable things happen consistently for years, you start to question everything you thought you knew. I'm Madison Williams, and what I'm about to share has followed my family for generations. It's not something I talk about often because most people either think I'm crazy or making it up for attention, but I need to get this off my chest. And maybe someone here has experienced something similar. It all started in our family home in Pinewood. It's a small community where everyone knows everyone. We lived in a modest 2-story house, nothing special or historically significant that would explain what happened there. My brother Jason's bedroom was downstairs, and mine was upstairs. Looking back, I realize now that the activity was always more intense downstairs. Jason had it way worse than I did. He'd constantly complain about doors slamming shut in the middle of the night. At first, my parents brushed it off as the house settling or drafts. But when the lights started flickering only in his room, and he heard voices whispering his name when nobody was there, my mom started to worry. Dad remained skeptical, claiming Jason was just looking for attention. I remember one night when I was around 12 years old, I woke up to Jason screaming. We all rushed downstairs to find him standing in the middle of his room, pale and shaking. He swore someone had been standing at the foot of his bed watching him. Dad checked every lock and window in the house. Everything was secure. Mom stayed with Jason until he fell back asleep, but none of us really slept that night. When Jason moved out at 18 to go to college, I inherited his room. I was terrified. Honestly, I'd heard all his stories and witnessed some of the strange occurrences myself. But surprisingly, whatever haunted that room seemed to go easier on me. I never saw full apparitions or heard the loud banging that tormented Jason. Instead, I had strange dreams, vivid ones where someone was trying to tell me something, but I could never quite understand the message. Occasionally, I'd hear my name whispered while I was alone in the house, but it wasn't threatening like it had been with Jason. It was almost familiar. The day I moved out to go to college, something happened that I still can't explain. There was this mirror that had hung in the hallway for 13 years without issue. It was secured properly. My dad was always thorough about that kind of thing. As I was carrying my last box out the door, there was a loud crash behind me. The mirror had fallen and shattered completely. No one was near it. There wasn't an earthquake or a truck driving by that might have shaken the house. It just fell. Mom said it was the house saying goodbye, but I knew it was something else. A few months after I left, Jason moved back in due to financial struggles. That's when things got really intense. He called me almost every night with new stories. Objects would move on their own. He'd wake up with scratches on his back. His girlfriend refused to stay over because she said the house made her feel like she was being watched. Then came the incident that finally made my dad a believer. Dad was always super logical, the type to find a rational explanation for everything. One morning, he came downstairs to find the George Foreman grill turned on with a plastic-wrapped loaf of bread melting on top of it. The weird part? Mom is obsessive about unplugging appliances before bed. She checks everything twice. There's no way that grill was plugged in when they went to sleep. Dad checked the plug. It wasn't frayed or showing any signs that could explain it turning on by itself. He couldn't explain it away, and I think that scared him more than the actual event. Another time, Jason was home alone with his girlfriend and their dog. They heard doors opening and closing downstairs when they were upstairs watching TV. Thinking someone had broken in, Jason grabbed a baseball bat and went to check. The dog followed, but stopped at the bottom of the stairs, hair raised, growling at something in the dark living room. Then they all heard it. A low, animalistic growl coming back at the dog, but there was nothing there. Their dog refused to go downstairs for weeks after that. Meanwhile, I had moved to California for work, thinking I'd left all this weirdness behind. I was wrong. It followed me. At first, it was small things, items not being where I left them, the feeling of being watched. Then it escalated. The dryer door would slam shut repeatedly when I was doing laundry alone. One day my vacuum cleaner was thrown across the room while I was in the kitchen. I ran in to find it on the opposite side of the living room from where I'd left it, still running. The most terrifying incident happened about 6 months after moving in. I was in the bathroom getting ready for work when the ceiling light fixture directly above me fell. But not straight down like you'd expect if it was loose. It was thrown to the side, landing in the bathtub as if someone had deliberately tossed it away from me. If it had fallen straight down, it would have hit me in the head. After that, I started researching. I bought a spirit box, one of those devices that scan radio frequencies that spirits supposedly use to communicate. I was skeptical but desperate for answers. The first time I used it, I got chills. A clear voice came through saying, "Like Madison." I asked if it knew me and it responded, "Always known." When I asked if it meant me harm, it said, "No, protect." I started regular sessions with the spirit box. During one session, I asked if it knew anyone in my family who had passed. It clearly said, "Ruth." Ruth was my aunt who died when I was 5. I barely remembered her, and I had never mentioned her name in my new place. There's no way anyone could have known that. The most unsettling interaction came when I asked why it followed me. It said, "Attached, family." When I asked what it wanted, it said, "Energy." Then it told me about a necklace I had lost years ago, a gift from my grandmother. It said, "Boxed, blue, attic." When I called my mom to check our attic at home, she found my necklace in an old blue jewelry box I had forgotten about. By this point, I was both fascinated and terrified. I bought a thermal camera attachment for my phone, hoping to capture evidence of whatever was following me. One night, while taking pictures of my living room, I captured something that still makes my skin crawl. There was a figure standing next to me and my 3-year-old daughter. The thermal outline was clear, the shape of a person, several degrees colder than the surrounding air. When I showed the image during my next spirit box session and asked what I was seeing, the response was, "Me, always here." I asked why it was standing next to my daughter, and it said, "Not her, him." My husband had been sitting on the couch just out of frame. When I asked what it wanted with my husband, the response chilled me. "Feed. Off him." My husband had been dealing with unexplained fatigue and mood swings for months. Things kept escalating. 2 weeks ago, I was up late working when I heard my name called from outside my bedroom window. We live on the 2nd floor. There's no way anyone could be outside that window. When I gathered the courage to look, I saw nothing but my own reflection staring back at me. Except, I swear my reflection smiled before I did. Just last night, I was alone in the kitchen when every light switch in the house flipped on simultaneously. Not just one or two, all of them, every room, every lamp, all at once. I haven't told my husband yet. He's already stressed about work, and I don't want to add to his worries. I've talked to Jason about it, and he believes whatever this is, it's attached to our bloodline, not any specific location. It's followed both of us to different states, different homes. Jason is convinced it's demonic, but I'm not so sure. It seems to treat me differently than it treats him or other family members, almost like it's protective of me while being aggressive toward everyone else. The strangest part is that when I was pregnant with my daughter, all activity stopped completely for 9 months. Not a single incident. Then the day after she was born, I came home from the hospital to find all her baby clothes had been taken out of the drawers and arranged in a circle on the nursery floor. I don't know what to do anymore. Moving doesn't help. Religious objects don't deter it. It's like this thing is a part of us now, woven into our family's fabric. Sometimes I think about what will happen when my daughter gets older. Will it follow her too? The thought keeps me up at night. Last week I tried asking it directly through the spirit box. What are you? The answer was simple but terrifying. Family now. When I asked how long it would stay with us, the response was just static, followed by what sounded like laughter. I've run out of explanations and solutions. Whatever this entity is, it's been with us for years and shows no signs of leaving. Sometimes I wonder if generations before us dealt with the same thing but never talked about it. How long has this really been going on? All I know is that right now, as I'm typing this, I can feel it watching me. The air around me is cold despite it being summer, and I swear I can hear breathing that isn't mine. I just hope by sharing this, someone might have answers, or at least let me know I'm not alone in experiencing something so impossible to explain. Story 4. I've been hesitating to write this down for weeks now, but I need to get this off my chest. I'm not normally the type to believe in the paranormal. I've got a background in biochemistry, and have always prided myself on finding logical explanations for things. But what happened last month in our house in Pinewood has completely shaken my worldview, and I honestly don't know what to make of it anymore. My husband Mark and I moved into his childhood home about 7 months ago. We had been living abroad for a few years for my research position, but when the grant funding dried up, we decided to move back to the States. Mark's father, Gerald, still lives in the family home, this big old suburban house from the 1970s with creaky wooden floors and those heavy old-school doors that make a very distinct sound when they open and close. It made financial sense to move in while we got settled. Plus, Gerald has been having some health issues, so we figured it would be good to be around. I should mention that I have 3 German Shepherds, Kaiser, Luna, and Stella. Kaiser is my service dog. I have an autoimmune condition, and he's been with me for 6 years. He's massive, about 95 pounds, with this imposing presence that makes delivery people hesitate at our gate, but he's perfectly trained and completely unflappable. Luna and Stella are younger and more playful. They're not service animals, just very sweet family pets. Anyway, what happened occurred on a Tuesday afternoon in the middle of August. I remember it was absurdly hot. That sticky, oppressive kind of heat where you can't get comfortable no matter what you do. Mark was at work, and Gerald had mentioned something about going to visit his brother in Lakeside, which is about 3 hours away. I was home alone with the dogs, working on some job applications at the kitchen table. Around noon, I decided to take a break and stretch my legs. Kaiser was passed out cold on his bed in the corner of the kitchen, completely dead to the world. The girls, Luna and Stella, were sprawled on the cool tile by the back door where we have this doggy door installed that lets them go in and out to the fenced yard whenever they want. I had just gotten up to refill my water glass when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of our front doors opening. Our house has this old wooden main door that creaks in a specific way, followed by a metal security door that has this distinctive clank when it closes. It's a sound pattern I've become very familiar with. Anyone who lives in a house with unique door sounds knows exactly what I mean. You can identify when someone's home just by the sound. The moment the doors sounded, Kaiser went from being completely unconscious to bolt upright in a single second. His ears shot straight up and he had this expression I'd never seen before. I can only describe it as absolute confusion mixed with fear. This was so out of character for him. This is a dog who remains calm during thunderstorms, fireworks, emergencies. Literally nothing phases him. That's why he's such a good service dog. I froze, water glass in hand, listening. That's when I heard the footsteps. They weren't particularly heavy or light, just normal footsteps moving through our entryway and into the living room. The girls immediately ran outside through their doggy door, which is what they always do when Mark or Gerald comes home. They go out to circle around to the back door to greet them. Kaiser stayed glued to my side, making this low whimpering sound I'd never heard from him before. His ears were fully erect, tracking the sound as it moved through the house. The footsteps continued, moving from the living room, through the dining room, and toward the kitchen where we were standing. But then they changed direction and headed toward the back door instead. I remember thinking it must be Gerald. Maybe he'd forgotten something before his trip and came back to get it. The girls were already at the back door, tails wagging, clearly expecting someone to be there. But there wasn't anyone there. The back door remained closed. The girls were looking expectantly at the door, tails still wagging, as if waiting for it to open. The footsteps continued. They moved back through the dining room into the hallway and toward the bedrooms. I stood completely still, heart pounding in my chest. Kaiser pressed himself against my leg, trembling slightly. I kept trying to rationalize it. Maybe it was the house settling. Maybe it was the neighbors. Maybe I was hearing things because of the heat. But houses don't settle in a pattern that sounds exactly like someone walking deliberately through rooms, and our neighbors aren't close enough for their movements to be audible inside our house. For about 15 minutes, the footsteps continued, moving from room to room. They never ran or moved quickly, just a steady, casual pace, like someone wandering through their own home. And then, as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. There was no sound of doors opening or closing. They just ceased. I finally got up the courage to call out, "Hello? Gerald, is that you?" My voice sounded thin and shaky even to my own ears. No response. After a few minutes of silence, Kaiser finally relaxed slightly, though he stayed unusually close to me. The girls came back inside looking confused, still glancing at the back door occasionally, as if someone might appear. I tried to go back to my job applications, but I couldn't focus. I kept listening for the footsteps to return. Kaiser wouldn't leave my side, and he kept looking around the room, his ears twitching at every small sound. When Mark got home around 2 in the afternoon, I was still sitting at the kitchen table, Kaiser pressed against my leg. The first thing Mark noticed was a puddle on the floor by Kaiser's bed. Kaiser had urinated there, something he had never ever done inside the house. This is a meticulously trained service animal who could hold his bladder for 12 hours if necessary. "What happened?" Mark asked, immediately concerned. I told him everything. The doors, the footsteps, Kaiser's reaction, the girls waiting at the back door. As I was explaining, I realized how crazy it all sounded, but Mark didn't dismiss me. Instead, he looked increasingly troubled. "Let me call Dad," he said, pulling out his phone. The conversation was brief. Mark asked his father if he'd come back to the house around noon, and from Mark's expression, I already knew the answer before he hung up. "Dad's been in Lakeside since 9 this morning," Mark said quietly. "He's still there now." We searched the entire house together, checked every closet, under every bed, behind every door. We looked for signs of a break-in, but there were none. Nothing was missing or even moved. The windows were all closed and locked from the inside. Both front and back doors were securely locked when Mark came home. That night, after Gerald returned, Mark told him what had happened. I expected Gerald to be concerned about a potential intruder, but instead he got this strange, sad look on his face. "It was probably your mother," he said to Mark, matter-of-factly. "She used to walk through the house like that when she was thinking about something." Mark's mother died in this house 16 years ago from cancer. I never met her, but there are photos of her everywhere. She was beautiful, tall with dark hair and the same hazel eyes that Mark has. Gerald turned to me. Did you and Mark have an argument recently? The question caught me off guard. Mark and I had gotten into a pretty intense fight the night before about our financial situation and whether we should stay in Pinewood or move closer to the city where job prospects were better. It had been our first serious argument since moving back to the States. She always did try to smooth things over when people were fighting, Gerald continued. Never could stand tension in the house. I didn't know how to respond. The scientific part of my brain was desperately searching for a rational explanation. Auditory hallucinations from stress, an elaborate prank, a neighbor with a key we didn't know about. But none of those explanations accounted for Kaiser's reaction. My dog doesn't react to hallucinations, he doesn't get scared of pranks, and he knows every person who would legitimately have access to our house. It's been 4 weeks now, and nothing like that has happened again. But I notice Kaiser staring intently at empty doorways sometimes. The girls occasionally run to the back door, tails wagging when no one is there, and sometimes when I'm home alone I catch myself listening for footsteps. I don't know what to believe anymore. All I know is that something happened that day that I can't explain, and it's changed how I feel about being alone in this house. I find myself wondering if we're truly alone here, or if Mark's mother is still walking through her home, checking on her family, trying to keep the peace in her own way. I never used to believe in ghosts. I'm still not sure that I do. But whatever happened that August afternoon has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about the world. And sometimes when the house is quiet, I find myself whispering a thank you to the empty air, just in case she's listening. Story 5. I've been debating whether to post this for weeks now. I'm still trying to make sense of what happened that night 3 months ago. I'm 14 now, but I was 11 when it happened. My hands are literally shaking as I type this, and I've had to delete and rewrite this intro like 5 times already because I don't know how to start. I guess I'll just dive in and tell you guys what happened. I live with my parents and younger sister in Greenhill. It's this small town where nothing ever happens. Literally, the most exciting thing is when the high school football team wins a game. We live in a 2-story house that's probably like 50 years old. Nothing special. Just a normal house in a normal neighborhood. My bedroom is upstairs at the end of the hallway. I've always been particular about my room. I like my door closed when I sleep. Not because I'm scared of the dark or anything, just because I like my privacy. My bed is pushed against the wall, and I always sleep facing the wall. It makes me feel safer somehow, like nothing can sneak up on me from behind because, well, there's a wall there. That night was a school night, a Tuesday in October. It wasn't cold enough yet for the heating to be on, but not warm enough to have the windows open either, just a regular fall night. I went to bed around 9:30 after finishing my homework and playing some video games. I remember feeling really tired because we'd had PE that day, and Mr. Wilson had made us run laps around the track for almost the entire period. I fell asleep pretty quickly. I don't remember dreaming at all, which is unusual for me because I normally have these really vivid dreams that I can remember the next day. But that night, nothing, just darkness. I woke up suddenly. At first I didn't know why. The house was quiet, no sounds from downstairs, no TV playing, no pipes creaking, just silence. My digital clock showed 3:17 in the morning. I remember that time exactly because I stared at those red numbers trying to figure out why I was awake. That's when I heard it. My name. Someone whispered Tyler right behind me. It wasn't loud, but it was clear, like someone was standing right next to my bed, leaning down to my ear. The voice wasn't one I recognized. It wasn't Mom or Dad or my sister Emma. It wasn't a voice I'd ever heard before. It was, I don't know how to describe it exactly, like someone trying to whisper but their voice was all wrong, like sandpaper on metal. Before I could even process the voice, I felt a hand on my shoulder. Not a grab, just a touch. 5 fingers pressing lightly through my t-shirt. The hand felt cold, even through the fabric. Not ice cold like in horror movies, but noticeably colder than a normal person's hand should be. I was facing the wall like I always do, and for a second, maybe 2 or 3 seconds, I just froze. My entire body went rigid. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I knew was that someone was in my room, someone had called my name, and someone was touching me. In my head, I was thinking it must be Dad checking on me, or maybe Mom. But deep down, I knew it wasn't them. They never came into my room at night, and that voice wasn't theirs. I turned over slowly. I didn't want to, but I had to know who was there. As I rolled over, the hand lifted from my shoulder. That's when I saw it. Standing beside my bed was a figure. Tall, taller than my dad, and he's 6'1". It was dark in my room, but I could see this thing because it had this faint green glow around its edges, like an outline of green light tracing its entire body. The glow wasn't bright enough to light up my room, but it was definitely there, like those glow-in-the-dark stars, but dimmer and moving. The weirdest part? I couldn't make out any features. No face, no clothes, nothing specific. Just a human-shaped shadow with this green outline, but even without a face, I could feel it looking at me. I knew it was staring directly at me. I could feel its gaze like a physical weight on my skin. We just stayed like that for what felt like forever, but was probably only about 5 seconds. Me, half sitting up in bed, and this thing standing there, glowing faintly green in the darkness of my bedroom. Then it moved. Not toward me, thank God. It turned away from my bed and walked, or maybe glided. I couldn't really tell if its feet were touching the ground, toward the outer wall of my bedroom, the wall that faces our backyard. And then it just walked through the wall, not like it disappeared. I watched it pass through the solid wall. The green glow made it possible for me to see the whole thing. 1 second it was in my room, the next second it was partially in the wall, and then it was gone. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, unable to move. My heart was pounding so hard, I could feel it in my throat. My ears were ringing. I felt hot and cold at the same time, like I had a fever. I kept staring at the wall, half expecting the thing to come back through. Finally, I managed to snap out of it. My first thought was that I needed to check if my door was open. Maybe someone had come in. Maybe it was just a dream, and I was still half asleep. I jumped out of bed and ran to my door. It was closed, completely closed, just like I always leave it at night. I tried the handle. It wasn't locked. My door doesn't have a lock, but it was definitely shut tight. That's when the panic really hit me. Whatever that thing was, it hadn't come through my door. No one in my family had checked on me. This wasn't a prank or a misunderstanding. Something impossible had just happened in my room. I started feeling sick. Really sick. My stomach knotted up and I knew I was going to throw up. I ran across the hall to the bathroom, slammed the door shut, and locked it. I barely made it to the toilet before I threw up everything in my stomach. After that, I just sat on the bathroom floor with my back against the tub. I was drenched in sweat. My t-shirt was soaked through like I'd just run a marathon. I was shaking uncontrollably, not just my hands, but my whole body. My teeth were chattering even though I wasn't cold. I stayed in that bathroom until the sun came up. I didn't dare go back to my room. I didn't dare call out for my parents. I was terrified that if I made any noise, that thing would hear me and come back. So I just sat there, staring at the bathroom door, jumping at every little creak and groan of the house. Around 6 in the morning, I heard my parents' alarm go off. I waited until I could hear them moving around, and then I finally unlocked the bathroom door and went downstairs. Mom was in the kitchen making coffee. She took one look at me and immediately asked what was wrong. I must have looked awful, pale with dark circles under my eyes, still shaking slightly. I told her I'd been sick in the night. It wasn't a lie. I just didn't tell her why. I couldn't. How do you tell your parents that some glowing green shadow person was in your room and walked through a wall? They'd think I was making it up or that I'd had a nightmare, but I know it wasn't a nightmare. I've had nightmares before. This was different. This was real. Over breakfast, I casually asked if anyone had come into my room during the night. Mom said no. Dad said he'd slept through the night. Emma said she hadn't left her room. No one had been in my room. No one had called my name. No one had touched my shoulder. I went to school that day, even though Mom offered to let me stay home. I couldn't stand the thought of being alone in that house. I couldn't focus on anything my teachers said. All I could think about was that figure and what would happen when night came again. After school, I went home and inspected my room thoroughly. I looked for any sign that someone had been there. Footprints, marks on the wall, anything out of place. Nothing. Everything was exactly as it should be. That night, I begged to sleep in Emma's room. I made up some excuse about having watched a scary movie at a friend's house. My parents thought it was silly, but they let me set up a sleeping bag on Emma's floor. I didn't sleep much, but at least I wasn't alone. I slept in my own room the next night, but I rearranged things first. I moved my bed to the middle of the room so it wasn't against any wall. I left my door slightly open. I even convinced my parents to let me have the small lamp from the living room so I could keep a light on. It's been 3 months now, and whatever that thing was hasn't come back. At least, I haven't seen it. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night feeling like I'm being watched, but there's never anything there when I look around. I've tried researching what I saw. I've looked up ghosts and spirits and shadow people. Some of what I read matches, but nothing explains the green glow. Nothing explains why it called my name or touched me. I haven't told any of my friends about this. They'd just laugh and say I had a nightmare or was seeing things. My parents would probably want to take me to a doctor or something, but I know what I saw. I know what I felt. That hand on my shoulder was real. That voice saying my name was real. That figure walking through my wall was real. I don't know what it was or why it came to me that night. I don't know if it'll ever come back. Sometimes I almost convince myself it was just a dream or my imagination. But then I remember how sick I got afterward, how my body reacted. You don't throw up from nightmares. You don't sweat through your clothes from imagination. Something was in my room that night, something that shouldn't exist, something that broke the rules of what's supposed to be possible. And the worst part, I'm scared that next time it might do more than just call my name and touch my shoulder. Next time it might not walk away. Story 6. I still don't know how to explain what happened that weekend at the old Peterson farmhouse. It's been 6 months, and I'm still trying to make sense of it. I've never been the type to jump at shadows or believe every creaking floorboard is a ghost, but I've always been sensitive to things others don't notice. My grandmother called it the sight and said it ran in our family. Whatever it is, it's made me aware of presences most people miss. From the moment we pulled up to that weathered 2-story farmhouse, I felt something. Not threatening, not cold like you'd expect with a haunting, but watchful, like when you feel someone's eyes on you in a crowded room. My partner Alex had found the place through a work colleague, a steal for a 10-day rental while we figured out if country living might be for us. We brought along our 2-year-old son, Mateo, and invited our friends Cara and Miguel to join us for part of the stay. They're both handy with renovations, and we'd promised them a countryside getaway in exchange for helping us evaluate what it would take to restore an old place like this. The farmhouse sat on 15 acres of overgrown fields, with the nearest neighbor half a mile down the dirt road. It was beautiful in that sad, neglected way. Peeling paint, wooden shutters hanging askew, but solid bones. Inside, the rooms were surprisingly well preserved with original hardwood floors and a massive stone fireplace. From day one, I noticed things. The sensation of being followed from room to room, Mateo babbling to empty corners. The way the temperature would suddenly warm in certain spots, especially in the upstairs hallway. Nothing scary, just impossible to ignore if you're attuned to such things. By our 5th night there, I'd grown accustomed to the presence. I even found myself saying good morning under my breath when entering the kitchen each day. Alex thought I was talking to Mateo. On our 9th evening, our last full night at the farmhouse, Alex, Cara, and Miguel decided to drive into town for dinner at the only restaurant within 20 miles. I volunteered to stay behind with Mateo, who was already asleep upstairs. He'd been cranky all day, and I didn't want to wake him. "We'll bring you back something," Alex promised, kissing my forehead before heading out. "Text if you need anything." After they left, I settled on the worn leather couch in the living room with my book and a glass of wine. The farmhouse creaked and settled around me as old houses do. The baby monitor sat on the coffee table, turned up high so I could hear Mateo's soft breathing. Outside, the darkness was absolute. No streetlights, no passing cars, just stars and moon when the clouds parted. Inside, I'd left on lights in the kitchen, living room, and the hallway leading upstairs. Around 10 o'clock, I heard Mateo sneeze through the monitor. that distinct little toddler sneeze that always made me smile. Then it happened. "Bless you," a voice said through the speaker, clear as day, gentle, feminine, almost grandmotherly. I froze, my wine glass halfway to my lips. The book slipped from my lap onto the floor with a thud. The voice hadn't been distorted or staticky like interference would be. It wasn't Alex or our friends playing a joke. They were miles away at dinner, and it certainly wasn't Matteo, who only spoke a jumble of Italian and Romanian words he'd picked up from Alex's family and mine. At 2 years old, he definitely didn't say, "Bless you," in perfect English. Here's the strangest part. I wasn't afraid. Startled, yes. Confused, absolutely, but not terrified like you'd expect. Something about that voice felt kind, protective even. I set down my wine glass and headed upstairs, taking the steps 2 at a time. When I reached Matteo's room, I pushed the door open slowly. The nightlight cast a soft glow across his portable cot, where he lay sleeping peacefully on his back, one arm flung above his head. The room felt warm, despite the early autumn chill outside. I scanned every corner, behind the dresser, in the closet. Nothing looked disturbed. The window was securely latched. The baby monitor sat on the nightstand, its green light blinking steadily. I stood there for several minutes, watching Matteo's chest rise and fall. Eventually, I tucked his blanket more securely around him and returned downstairs, keeping the monitor volume cranked high. When Alex and the others returned around 11:30, laughing and bringing in the scent of fried food and beer, I didn't mention what had happened. It was our last night, and I didn't want to alarm everyone or have them think I was losing it. Besides, whoever had spoken through that monitor hadn't felt threatening. We stayed up another hour or so, the 4 of us playing cards at the kitchen table. Throughout the night, I kept glancing at the monitor, but nothing unusual happened again. Eventually, we all headed to bed. The next morning changed everything. Alex and I woke around 7 to Matteo's usual morning babbling. Still groggy, Alex rolled out of bed first and headed to Matteo's room while I stretched and checked my phone. "Lena," Alex called, voice tense, "you need to come see this." Something in that tone made me jump up immediately. I hurried down the hallway, heart pounding. Had Matteo gotten hurt somehow? Had something fallen in the night? When I reached the doorway, I stopped dead in my tracks. Matteo was sitting up in his portable cot, looking perfectly content and playing with books. Not 1 or 2 books, but at least 20 of them. Some open, some closed, stacked around him like a little fortress. He was happily turning pages of a large hardcover, babbling to himself. "Did you do this?" Alex whispered, looking at me with wide eyes. I shook my head, unable to speak. The cot had been positioned about 2 feet away from a tall bookshelf, close enough that an adult could reach over and grab a book, but the cot's barriers were much too high for Matteo to climb over, and even if he somehow could, the shelf was too far away for him to reach while standing in his cot. "Maybe he got out somehow," Alex suggested, but we both knew that was impossible. Matteo couldn't climb out of his cot yet. We'd specifically bought one with high sides because he was an active sleeper, and the books were heavy hardcovers, art books, travel guides, old encyclopedias that had been left on the farmhouse shelves. There was no way our toddler could have carried all those books one by one without making noise or dropping some. Most telling of all, there were no books on the floor around the cot. If Matteo had somehow managed this feat himself, there would have been evidence of his struggle. Books dropped, maybe things knocked over. But everything was neat, almost deliberately arranged. "Mama," Matteo greeted me cheerfully, holding up a book with a colorful illustration of a farm. "Look." I approached slowly, checking the latch on his cot. It was still securely fastened from the outside. "When did you do this?" Alex asked again, voice lower this time. "I didn't," I whispered back. "I swear, Alex, I went straight to bed after you." We stood there in stunned silence, watching our son happily flip through books that someone, or something, had placed around him during the night. As we packed up to leave that morning, I could feel Alex's uneasiness. He rushed through breakfast, eager to get on the road. I found myself moving more slowly, oddly reluctant to leave. Just before we closed the trunk of our car, with Matteo already buckled into his car seat, Alex turned to me. This might sound weird, but did you ever feel anything strange in that house, like we weren't alone? I hesitated, then told him everything. The presence I'd felt since day one, the voice on the baby monitor, my strange lack of fear. "Why didn't you say something?" he asked, not accusingly, but with genuine curiosity. "Because it never felt threatening," I explained. Whatever was there seemed to be watching over us, especially Matteo. Alex nodded slowly, glancing back at the farmhouse one last time. "Well, I'm glad we're leaving. No offense to your friendly ghost, but I prefer houses without extra residents." I smiled and squeezed his hand. But as we drove away, I couldn't help looking in the rearview mirror at the old farmhouse growing smaller in the distance. In the upstairs window of what had been Matteo's room, I thought I saw a brief flicker of movement, just a shadow passing by the glass. To this day, I can't explain what happened that weekend, but sometimes when Matteo is playing alone, I catch him talking to someone I can't see, and occasionally when he sneezes, I swear I hear a faint "bless you" that doesn't come from me or Alex. Whatever was in that farmhouse, I believe it meant well. Some nights I still think about that gentle voice and those carefully arranged books, and I find myself whispering a thank you to the unseen guardian who spent a night providing blessings and bedtime stories to my little boy. Story 7. I've never told anyone the full story of what happened that night at my brother's house in Cleveland. It's been almost 2 years, and I still get goosebumps thinking about it. I know how it sounds. Trust me, I've gone over every logical explanation 1,000 times, but I know what I felt. I was 19, angry at the world, and making one bad decision after another. I'd dropped out of Youngstown State after just one semester. College wasn't for me, I told myself, but the truth was I wasn't showing up to classes and was too busy partying. My girlfriend Jenna was probably the only good thing in my life at that point, but I was too immature to see it. That Friday night in February, Jenna and I were staying at my brother Mike's place, this old 2-story house he rented with a couple friends. It wasn't exactly the Ritz. The place perpetually smelled like beer and wet dog. Mike had 2 pit bulls, Tank and Chocolate, that lived in the basement. They were good dogs, but Chocolate was always trying to sneak upstairs when nobody was looking. Jenna and I had been fighting all week. I can't even remember what about now. Probably something stupid that was mostly my fault. She'd fallen asleep on the living room couch around 10, exhausted from working double shifts at the hospital where she was a nursing assistant. I was still up, scrolling through my phone, feeling restless and sorry for myself. Around midnight, Mike came home with a bunch of people from some club downtown. Music started blasting, drinks were flowing, and suddenly the house was packed. I should have just gone to bed with Jenna, but instead I joined the party. There was this girl there, Amber something. She kept smiling at me from across the room, and I kept looking back. I'd had maybe 4 beers by then, just enough to make really stupid decisions seem like good ideas. When she headed upstairs to use the bathroom, I followed her a minute later. I caught up with her in the hallway and started talking. I was saying all this crap about how me and my girlfriend were basically done and just staying together for now. The words were coming out of my mouth, but it was like I was watching myself from outside my body, thinking, who is this asshole? She looked at me for a long second, then just shook her head and said, "Your girlfriend is literally asleep downstairs right now. What kind of person does that make you?" Then she walked into the bathroom and shut the door in my face. I stood there feeling like the lowest piece of garbage on the planet. The shame hit me like a truck. What the hell was I doing? Jenna deserved better than this. I deserved that humiliation. I went back downstairs feeling sick to my stomach. The party was still going, but I just wanted to disappear. I couldn't bring myself to go to the couch where Jenna was sleeping. I couldn't be next to her knowing what I'd just tried to do, so I took the other couch across the room. It was one of those old leather couches that's too short for anyone over 5'5", which meant my feet hung off the armrest. I grabbed this thin blanket and pulled it over me, draping my right arm over my head like I always do when I'm stressed. The blanket only covered me from the chest down, so my arm was just hanging there over the edge of the couch. The living room was dark except for the kitchen light spilling in. People were still talking and laughing, but it all sounded far away now. I closed my eyes, not expecting to actually fall asleep with all the noise, but I must have drifted off because suddenly I was in that weird half-awake state. You know when you're almost asleep but still aware of your surroundings? That's where I was when I heard what sounded like claws clicking on the hardwood floor. My first thought was, Chocolate got out again. That dog was an escape artist, always finding ways to nudge the basement door open. I tried to move to check, but I couldn't. My body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. My eyes were the only thing I could control. I could open them, look around, but couldn't move my head or limbs. Sleep paralysis. I'd had it once before in high school, so I recognized the feeling, but that didn't make it any less terrifying. That's when I felt something climb onto the couch with me. The couch cushion by my feet sank down slightly. I strained to look, but couldn't see anything in the dim light. Whatever it was moving slowly toward my upper body. I felt the weight shift as it crept closer. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might burst. I tried to scream, to move, to do anything, but I was completely frozen. The only thing I could do was blink and breathe these shallow, panicked breaths. Then I felt it, hot breath on my outstretched hand that was hanging over my head. I tried desperately to pull my arm back, but it wouldn't budge. The breathing got heavier, closer, and then the teeth. They sank into the fleshy part between my thumb and index finger, slowly, deliberately. It wasn't a quick bite. It was gradual, increasing pressure that went from uncomfortable to painful to excruciating. I felt each individual tooth break the skin and push deeper. The pain was so sharp and clear that tears sprang to my eyes. But the worst part, it felt intentional, like whatever was biting me was doing it to send a message. It wasn't a dog nipping at me or trying to play. This felt calculated. The paralysis finally broke when the pain hit its peak. I jerked upright, tumbling off the couch and onto the floor with a loud thud. My heart was racing, and I was gasping for air like I'd been underwater. I frantically looked around the room, expecting to see Chocolate or Tank, but there was nothing. No dogs. The music had died down, and only a few people were still in the kitchen. Jenna was still sound asleep on the other couch, undisturbed by my panic. My hand was throbbing. I scrambled to my feet and rushed to the kitchen to look at it under the light. I expected to see blood, puncture wounds, something, but there was nothing. No marks at all. The skin was completely intact, not even red. But the pain was still there. A deep, aching throb that felt 100% real. I stood there, staring at my unmarked hand, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I dreamed it? But the pain felt too real, too specific. And I was still feeling it, even now that I was fully awake. My next thought was to check on the dogs. I walked to the basement door, and sure enough, it was firmly closed. I opened it slowly and flipped on the light. Both Tank and Chocolate were down there, looking up at me curiously from their beds. They hadn't moved. There was no way either of them could have been upstairs with me. I closed the door and leaned against it, my legs feeling weak. What the hell had just happened? Sleep paralysis explained why I couldn't move, but not the bite, not the weight on the couch, not the deliberate, slow pain. I went back to the living room and sat in an armchair across from the couches, keeping the lights on. There was no way I was going back to sleep. I sat there until morning, jumping at every creak in that old house, checking my hand over and over. When Jenna woke up, I couldn't tell her what happened. How could I explain that something bit me right after I'd tried to cheat on her, that the bite left no mark but still hurt, that it felt like punishment? She'd think I was making up some weird story to cover something else up, or that I was losing my mind. We broke up about a month later. Not because of that night. Our relationship had been on the rocks for a while, but I never told her about what happened, and I never tried to cheat on her again. Not once. The thought of being with someone else after that night made my hand throb with phantom pain. I've spent countless hours trying to rationalize what happened. Maybe it was just a vivid dream combined with sleep paralysis. Maybe my guilt manifested physically somehow. Maybe one of the dogs did get upstairs and then went back down without anyone noticing. But deep down, I know none of those explanations fit. Whatever bit me that night wasn't a dog. It wasn't sleep paralysis. It was something else, something that knew what I was about to do and decided to stop me. I've never come close to cheating since then. Whenever I'm tempted, and let's be real, everyone gets tempted sometimes, I feel a phantom ache in my hand, a reminder. I don't know if it was a ghost or a demon or just my conscience taking physical form, but something bit me that night, and even though it left no mark anyone else could see, it changed me forever. I still sleep with my arm tucked firmly under the blankets. Story 8. I don't even know where to begin with this, but I need to get it off my chest. I've been carrying this for years, and honestly, it still makes my skin crawl every time I think about it. I'm 27 now, but this happened when I was 16, and I swear on everything I care about that every word of this is true. Growing up, we lived in this older two-story house. Nothing fancy, just a regular middle-class home in a quiet neighborhood. We only had one full bathroom, which was fine most of the time, but I developed this, I don't know how to describe it, other than a visceral dread of being in there alone. My parents thought I was being dramatic. My dad would roll his eyes whenever I'd ask someone to wait outside the door while I showered. The thing about our bathroom is that it had this really high window with frosted glass. You know, the kind that lets light in, but you can't actually see through it clearly, just blurry shapes and shadows. The window was positioned above the shower, at least 10 feet from the ground outside. There was no way anyone could look in without a serious ladder, but I always felt like someone, or something, was watching me in there. I tried to ignore it for years. I'd rush through showers, barely taking time to wash my hair properly. I'd avoid looking at that window at all costs. When I told my mum about my fears, she just said I had an overactive imagination and that I needed to grow out of it. So I stopped mentioning it, but the feeling never went away. That night in October started like any other. It was around 9 in the evening, and I needed to shower before bed. My parents were downstairs watching TV. I remember the house felt extra quiet that night, even with the distant sound of the television. I grabbed my towel, my pajamas, and reluctantly made my way to the bathroom. As soon as I stepped inside and closed the door, that familiar sense of unease washed over me. I tried to shake it off as I undressed and stepped into the shower. I turned the water as hot as I could stand it, hoping the steam would fog up the window and give me some sense of privacy from whatever I imagined was out there. I was mid-shampoo when it started, this weird tingling sensation at the top of my head. At first, I thought maybe some shampoo had dripped down, but this was different. It felt like static electricity crawling down my face. My scalp prickled, and the hairs on my arms stood up despite the hot water beating down on me. The feeling intensified with each passing second. I rushed to rinse my hair, nearly getting soap in my eyes. The entire time I kept my gaze firmly on the shower wall, refusing to look up at that window. The tingling spread down my neck and across my shoulders until my entire body felt like it was humming with electricity. Something was different this time. In all the years I'd felt watched in that bathroom, it had never been this intense. I just knew something was there. I shut off the water, and the sudden silence was deafening. Water dripped from the showerhead, each drop echoing loudly in the small space. I reached for my towel, hanging just outside the shower curtain, and wrapped it around myself with shaking hands. That's when I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from the direction of the window, like fingernails gently dragging across glass. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear my pulse in my ears. I stood frozen, dripping wet, clutching my towel like it was some kind of shield. A voice in my head, not my conscious thoughts, but something deeper, more instinctual, screamed at me, "Don't look up. Whatever you do, don't look at the window." But another part of me, the logical 16-year-old who was tired of being afraid of shadows, argued back, "This is ridiculous. There's nothing there. It's just your imagination. Look up and prove it to yourself so you can stop being such a baby." I took a deep breath, gathering what little courage I had. "It's just a window," I whispered to myself. "There's nothing there. How could there be? It's too high." With my heart in my throat, I slowly raised my eyes to the frosted glass window. And that's when I saw it. A face was pressed against the glass, distorted by the frosted texture, but unmistakably there. It wasn't just a shadow or a trick of light. It was a face, with dark hollows where eyes should be, staring directly at me. The worst part wasn't just that there was a face. It was the impossibility of it. That window was at least 10 feet off the ground outside. Whatever was looking in at me would have had to be inhumanly tall to reach it. I screamed. I screamed louder than I've ever screamed in my life. My legs gave out, and I fell backward, tripping over the edge of the bathtub. My elbow hit the tile floor hard, sending shooting pain up my arm, but I barely registered it. I scrambled backward until my back hit the door, still screaming, still staring at that window where the face remained pressed against the glass. I heard my parents' footsteps thundering up the stairs, my mom calling my name in panic. My dad was pounding on the door. "Abigail, what's wrong? Open the door." My mom's voice was high-pitched with fear. I couldn't move. I couldn't take my eyes off that window where the face was now, impossibly, smiling. Not a friendly smile. It was the kind of smile that makes your insides turn to ice, and then, between one blink and the next, it was gone. Just gone. My dad was still pounding on the door, now threatening to break it down. With trembling hands, I reached up and unlocked it, then scooted back as they burst in. Mom dropped to her knees beside me, checking me for injuries while Dad scanned the bathroom, looking for whatever had caused me to scream. "What happened? Are you hurt?" Mom's hands were cool against my face, which felt feverish with fear. I pointed at the window, my hand shaking so badly I could barely hold it up. There was a face. At the window. Someone was watching me. My dad looked at the window, then back at me, his expression shifting from concern to annoyance. "Abigail, that window is nearly 10 feet off the ground outside. No one could be looking in." "I know what I saw." My voice cracked. There was something looking in at me. Dad sighed heavily, running a hand through his hair. "You're 16 years old, Abby. Aren't you a little old for this kind of imagination?" "I'm not imagining things." Tears of frustration and fear streamed down my face. I know what I saw, but it was clear neither of them believed me. Mom helped me up, handed me my pajamas, and ushered Dad out so I could get dressed. I pulled on my clothes as quickly as I could, never taking my eyes off that window. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept the lights on and sat with my back against the headboard, staring at my bedroom door until dawn broke. I didn't tell my parents anything more about what I'd seen. What was the point? They thought I was being childish, making things up for attention. For the next several years, I refused to shower when I was home alone. I'd wait until someone else was in the house, and even then, I'd ask them to stay upstairs within earshot. I never looked at that window again, not once. I'd keep my eyes fixed firmly on the shower wall or the floor, rushing through my routine as quickly as possible. I never mentioned the incident again, not to my parents, not to friends, not to anyone. I buried it deep, convincing myself that maybe, just maybe, my dad was right. Maybe it had been my imagination after all, until 9 years later. I was 25, visiting my parents for the weekend. Dad was out in the garage working on his car, and Mom and I were having coffee at the kitchen table, just catching up. Somehow we got on the topic of childhood fears, and Mom laughed softly. "Remember how you used to be so afraid of the bathroom? You fell that one time and scared us half to death with your screaming." My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. It had been so long since anyone had mentioned that night. "Yeah," I said carefully, setting my cup down. I thought I saw something at the window." Mom's smile faded slightly. She glanced toward the doorway, as if checking that Dad wasn't within earshot. Then she leaned forward and lowered her voice. "What exactly did you see that night, Abby?" There was something in her tone that made my stomach clench. She wasn't asking like someone humoring a child's imagination. She was asking like someone who needed to know. "A face," I whispered, the memory suddenly vivid again, pressed against the glass, watching me. Mom went very still, her face drained of color, and for a long moment she just stared at me. Then she reached across the table and took my hand. "I've seen it too," she said so quietly I almost didn't hear her. I felt like the floor had dropped out from under me. "What?" "Not just once, several times over the years." Her hand tightened on mine. "I never said anything because your father would think I was crazy, and I didn't want to frighten you kids." What is it?" My voice was barely audible. Mom shook her head. "I don't know, but it's tall, impossibly tall. I used to see it as a shadow outside the window when I'd shower, sometimes just standing there, sometimes watching." A chill ran down my spine despite the warm kitchen. "What did you do?" "I talked to it," Mom said, and a hysterical laugh almost escaped me. Not out loud, just in my head. I'd tell it that we had nothing to do with each other, that it needed to leave us alone, and usually it would walk away. "Walk away," I repeated numbly. "So it has a body." I only ever saw the shadow, but it moved like a person, just wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. We sat in silence for a long moment, the implications of her words sinking in. All those years, I'd tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, but it wasn't. It was real. Whatever I'd seen that night had been real. "Does Grandma's house have a bathroom window?" I suddenly asked, remembering how Mom had grown up in an old farmhouse outside of town. Mom's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, in almost the exact same position." She hesitated. "Your grandmother had stories too, things she never told me until I was an adult." That conversation opened a floodgate. Mom shared other strange experiences she'd had in our house over the years. Things moved when no one was home, footsteps in empty hallways, a persistent feeling of being watched. "The thing is, I've moved away now. I live in an apartment in the city, hundreds of miles from my parents' house, but I still can't shake the fear. Every time I step into a bathroom with a window, I feel that same tingling sensation start at the top of my head. I've covered the small window in my apartment bathroom with contact paper so thick you can't see anything through it, because I know now that whatever was watching me that night wasn't just watching me. It's been watching my family for generations. And sometimes, late at night when I'm drifting off to sleep, I swear I can hear the faint sound of fingernails gently scratching at glass." Story 9. I've been living in this old house for about 2 years now. It's in a small town that I won't name because I'm still here, and honestly, I don't want any ghost hunters or curious people showing up at my door. The house was built in 1902 according to the property records I looked up after all this started happening. It's a 2-story with a full basement, which is where most of this stuff has been centered. I never believed in ghosts or any of that paranormal crap before moving here. I was the guy who'd laugh at ghost hunting shows and roll my eyes when friends would tell spooky stories. But living in this house has completely changed my perspective. I'm not saying I know what's happening, but something is definitely wrong with this place. When I first moved in, I had a roommate, Jake. We'd been friends since high school and decided to rent this place together because it was surprisingly affordable for its size. The landlord seemed eager to rent it out, which should have been our first red flag. The second red flag should have been all the weird architectural quirks, especially the boarded-up crawl spaces. There are several of them, and they extend under the yard and even the driveway. I've never seen anything like it in any other house. The first few weeks were normal. We were just excited to have our own place. Then Jake started acting weird. He'd wake up in the middle of the night claiming he heard people talking. At first, I thought he was dreaming, or maybe hearing the neighbors through the walls. But one night, about 3 months after we moved in, I woke up to the sound of smashing. Jake was in the hallway with a hammer, literally tearing into the drywall. "They're in the fucking walls, man," he kept saying. "I can hear them talking about me." I had to physically restrain him and call his brother to come get him. Jake never came back to live here. He told me later that he'd been hearing voices for weeks, whispers at first, then full conversations. They'd talk about the boy upstairs and sometimes even call him by name. He said it was like they were having conversations just out of earshot, but if he concentrated, he could make out what they were saying. I thought Jake had just had some kind of mental breakdown until about a month after he moved out. I was alone in the house, sitting in my bedroom upstairs working on my laptop. It was dead quiet. No TV, no music, nothing. Then I heard it. 3 distinct coughs from the basement. It sounded exactly like a man clearing his throat. Ahem, ahem, ahem. 3 times in a row. My blood went cold. I knew I was alone in the house. I'd locked all the doors and windows before going upstairs. I grabbed the shotgun I keep for home defense, locked my bedroom door, and called Jake's brother, who lived nearby, to come check the house with me. We searched every inch of that basement together. No one was there. No signs of a break-in. Nothing. That was the first time I experienced something I couldn't explain, but it definitely wasn't the last. I got a dog after that, a German Shepherd mix named Rusty. I figured a dog would be good company and maybe some protection if it turned out there actually was someone breaking in somehow. Rusty is normally the sweetest, most chill dog you could imagine, but in this house he acts completely different. He'll suddenly stand at attention, staring at empty corners of rooms, the hair on his back standing up as he growls at absolutely nothing. Sometimes he'll bark frantically at the basement door, refusing to go down there even when I try to lead him. One night about 6 months ago, I was lying in bed trying to fall asleep when I heard a tapping on my window. My bedroom is on the 2nd floor, and there's no way anyone could reach the window without a very tall ladder. The tapping was rhythmic. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. It went on for maybe 20 minutes before I got up the courage to pull back the curtains. There was nothing there. I told myself it was just a tree branch, but the closest tree is at least 15 feet from the house. As soon as I got back in bed, the tapping started again. I turned on all the lights in my room and it stopped. For about 10 minutes, then it started again, even with the lights on. This continued for hours. I called my friend Mike at around 3 in the morning, completely freaked out. He came over and walked around the entire yard with a flashlight. Nothing, no ladder, no long sticks, nothing that could possibly be hitting my 2nd-story window. The tapping finally stopped around dawn. I was exhausted and terrified, and I seriously considered moving out that day, but I'd sunk most of my savings into this place, and finding somewhere new wasn't financially possible. I started researching the house's history after that night. The town records don't show anything unusual, just a series of families who lived here over the decades. No reported deaths in the house, no violent crimes, nothing that would explain what was happening. But then, about 2 months ago, I decided to renovate one of the rooms in the basement to make a home office. The basement has 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a large open area. One of the bedrooms had old, musty carpet that I wanted to replace. When I pulled it up, I found something strange. The concrete floor underneath was painted red. At first, I didn't think much of it. Maybe a previous owner just liked red floors. But then I realized it was the only room in the house with a painted concrete floor, except for the other basement bedroom, which was also painted the exact same shade of red. As I was examining the floor more closely, I noticed areas where the paint had worn away, revealing darker red patches underneath. Something about these spots made me uneasy. They didn't look like regular concrete or a different color of paint. They looked absorbed into the concrete. I remembered reading somewhere that hydrogen peroxide will bubble if it comes into contact with blood. I had some under the bathroom sink, so I grabbed it and poured a little onto one of the darker patches. The entire area immediately started fizzing and bubbling like crazy. My stomach dropped. There was blood, a lot of blood, soaked into that concrete. I've watched enough crime shows to know that concrete floors in old houses don't just have random bloodstains unless something very bad happened there. I poured peroxide on other spots around both basement bedrooms. Same reaction everywhere. The entire floors of both rooms had been soaked in blood, and someone had tried to cover it up with red paint. That night, the paranormal activity ramped up like never before. The voices that Jake had described, I started hearing them too. Muffled conversations that seemed to be coming from the basement or the walls. I couldn't make out most of what they were saying, but occasionally I'd catch phrases like, "He knows now," or "Don't let him leave." Rusty refused to come inside the house that night. He stayed on the porch, howling. I ended up sleeping in my car. The next day, I started looking more closely at those boarded-up crawl spaces. They're all sealed with newer wood than the rest of the house, suggesting they were covered up long after the house was built. One of them is directly underneath the basement bedrooms with the blood-soaked floors. I've been too terrified to open any of them. I don't know what I might find, and honestly, I don't think I want to know. But I'm pretty sure whatever happened in those basement rooms, whatever caused all that blood, is connected to why this house is the way it is. Last week, I was in the kitchen making dinner when I heard that coughing again from the basement. 3 coughs just like before. Then footsteps on the basement stairs, slow, deliberate steps coming up toward the kitchen door. I grabbed a knife and stood there, paralyzed with fear as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs. The doorknob turned slowly, but the door didn't open. I keep it locked now. Then I heard breathing on the other side of the door. Heavy, ragged breathing that didn't sound entirely human. I ran out the front door and didn't come back until morning. I know this all sounds crazy. Trust me, I know. If someone had told me this story 3 years ago, I would have thought they were making it up or needed psychiatric help, but I've never experienced anything like this before or since living in this house. Whatever is happening here is specific to this location. I'm saving up to move out, but it's taking time. In the meantime, I sleep with my shotgun next to my bed and Rusty on the floor beside me. On the nights he'll actually come inside. I've thought about contacting the previous owners to ask if they experienced similar things, but part of me is afraid of what they might tell me. I'm convinced something terrible happened in this house, specifically in those basement rooms. Multiple people may have died there, and whoever did it tried to cover it up with red paint and by sealing off the crawl spaces. I don't know if ghosts are real, but I know that whatever energy or memory or whatever you want to call it that's left behind in this place is malevolent. The worst part is, I think it knows I found out about the blood. The activity has become more aggressive since that day. Just last night, as I was falling asleep, I distinctly heard a voice right next to my ear whisper, "You're next." I turned on the light so fast I knocked my lamp over, but of course no one was there. I don't know what to do. I don't know who to tell. All I know is that I won't be opening those crawl spaces, and I won't be going down to the basement alone again. Not after what I found. Story 10. I still don't sleep well at night. It's been 3 months since what happened in my great-grandfather's woods, and I can't shake the feeling that something is watching me. My parents think I'm just being dramatic, typical for a 14-year-old, they say, but they weren't there. They didn't see what I saw. It was mid-October, one of those perfect fall days where the air is crisp but not too cold. My family was having our annual get-together at my great-grandfather William's old property in Oak Hollow. It's this small rural community where everybody knows everybody, and my family has owned about 80 acres there since forever. Great-grandpa William used to run a horse farm on the property before he passed, but now it's mostly just woods with a few clearings and the old family house where my grandparents live. My cousins Jake and Mitch, 16 and 15, were visiting too, and we were bored out of our minds listening to our parents talk about boring adult stuff. So we decided to go explore the woods like we always do. I'd been in those woods 1,000 times before. I shot my first buck there last year from this tree stand my dad and I set up. I was actually excited to show Jake and Mitch where I got it. We grabbed some sodas from the cooler and headed out, our parents barely noticing as they debated something about property taxes. The woods were beautiful that day, all red and gold leaves, the sunlight coming through in these perfect beams. It was around 2 in the afternoon, so we had plenty of daylight left. So where's this famous tree stand where little Tyler became a man? Jake was always teasing me about being the youngest. It's about half a mile in by the big oak with the split trunk, I said. I'll show you. We walked for a while, just talking about normal stuff, video games, school. This girl Mitch liked. It felt so normal, you know? Just 3 cousins hanging out in the woods. I wish it had stayed that way. When we got to where the tree stand should have been, I stopped dead in my tracks. The stand wasn't there. Not like it had fallen down or been removed. It was just in a completely different tree about 30 yards away. That's weird, I said, pointing. The stand used to be on that oak with the split trunk, not over there on that pine. Jake shrugged. Maybe your dad moved it. No way. It doesn't make any sense to put it there. You can't see the clearing from that spot. Plus my dad would have told me. Mitch walked over to look at the stand in its new location. Looks like it's been here a while. There's rust on the bolts. Something about this really bothered me. I know it sounds stupid, but it felt wrong. Like when you come home and someone's moved all your furniture an inch to the left. You can't quite put your finger on what's different, but you know something is. Whatever, Jake said. Let's check out the old cabin instead. That place is supposed to be haunted, right? He was talking about this small cabin deeper in the woods that my great-great-grandfather used for woodcutting and butchering. It's been abandoned for decades, but it's still standing. My Uncle Tim told me stories about it when I was younger, said he heard weird things out there when he was a kid. We started walking toward the cabin, which was about another mile into the woods. I couldn't stop thinking about the tree stand, though. I kept looking back over my shoulder like I expected it to move again while I was watching. We were about halfway to the cabin when I heard it, a door slamming shut. Not like a car door or a screen door, but a heavy wooden door closing with a thud. It wasn't super loud, but clear enough that I stopped walking. Did you guys hear that? I asked. Hear what? Mitch had his earbuds in, listening to music on his phone. That door. It sounded like a door closing. Jake frowned. I heard something, probably just a branch falling, but I knew it wasn't a branch. It sounded exactly like the back door at my grandparents' house. Old wood hitting the frame, and the only building out here was the cabin, which was still a good distance away. Then I remembered what my Uncle Tim had told me years ago. He said if I ever heard strange noises in these woods, like doors shutting or glass breaking, I should get out immediately. Don't investigate, don't hang around, just leave. Maybe we should head back, I suggested, trying to sound casual. Why? We just got out here, Jake said. I thought you wanted to show us the cabin. I don't know. I've got a weird feeling. Oh my God, are you scared? Mitch laughed, pulling out one earbud. Little Tyler's afraid of the big bad woods. I wasn't afraid then, not really, just uneasy. But I should have been afraid. I should have listened to that feeling in my gut. Fine, whatever. Let's keep going. I didn't want them thinking I was a chicken. We continued toward the cabin, and I tried to convince myself that the sound was just my imagination. But then we heard it again. Another door slam, followed by what sounded like someone dragging something heavy across a wooden floor. This time both Jake and Mitch heard it too. We all stopped. Okay, that was weird, Jake admitted. You think someone else is out here? Maybe hunters? Mitch suggested, but he didn't sound convinced. No one hunts on our property without permission, I said, and nobody mentioned visitors today. We stood there for a minute, all of us suddenly not so eager to keep going. Then we heard a woman's voice, distant but clear enough that we all looked at each other to confirm we'd heard it. There's someone at the cabin, Jake said. Maybe we should check it out. My uncle said, your uncle probably just wanted to scare you, Mitch interrupted. Come on, let's see who it is. Before I could argue, they started walking again, faster now. I followed, but that feeling of wrongness was getting stronger with every step. The cabin came into view about 10 minutes later. It's not much to look at. Just a one-room structure made of old logs with a stone foundation. The roof sags in the middle and one of the windows is broken. It's been empty for as long as I can remember, except it didn't look empty that day. There was smoke coming from the chimney. Just a thin wisp, but definitely smoke. See? Someone squatting there, Jake said. Probably some homeless person. We should go back and tell my grandpa, I said. This is his property. Don't be such a baby, Mitch replied. Let's just see who it is first. As we got closer, we heard the voice again. A woman crying, not like a little kid crying or an old person. It sounded like a middle-aged woman, and she was really upset. Jake and Mitch looked at each other, suddenly less confident. Maybe Tyler's right, Jake said quietly. We should go back. But then we heard the woman clearly say, "Help me, please, somebody help me." And how do you walk away from that? How do you hear someone begging for help and just leave? We have to see if she's okay, I said, forgetting all about my uncle's warning. Jake shook his head. I don't like this. Let's go get your grandpa. By the time we get back, she could be, I don't know, she sounds really bad. I'm not going in there, Mitch said firmly. This is how horror movies start. Fine, I said. You guys go back. I'll just peek in the window and see if she's okay. If she is, I'll come right back. They tried to talk me out of it, but I was determined. Looking back, I think I was trying to prove something, that I wasn't scared, that I could handle things on my own. Stupid. Jake and Mitch finally gave up and started heading back, promising to get help. They practically ran, glancing back at me like they expected me to change my mind and follow them. I almost did, but instead I walked up to the cabin alone. The crying got louder as I approached. Through the broken window, I could see movement inside, a shadow passing back and forth. "Hello?" I called out, not too loud. "Are you okay in there?" The crying stopped abruptly. Complete silence followed, which was somehow worse than the crying. I crept up to the window and peered inside. What I saw will stay with me forever. There was a woman standing in the middle of the cabin. She was wearing this old-fashioned dress, like something from 100 years ago, dirty and torn at the hem. Her hair was a mess hanging in her face, and she was holding a knife. Not a kitchen knife, but something bigger, like a hunting knife. As I watched, frozen in place, she raised the knife and stabbed herself in the stomach. I must have made a sound, a gasp or something, because she looked directly at me. Her eyes were wrong. I can't explain it better than that. They were just wrong, like they didn't belong in her face. "He's coming back," she said, her voice completely calm now despite the blood spreading across her dress. "William always comes back." William, my great-grandfather's name. I should have run then. Everything in me was screaming to run, but I couldn't move. It was like my feet were nailed to the ground. The woman walked toward the window, the knife still stuck in her stomach. She was smiling now. "Are you William's boy?" she asked, her head tilting at an impossible angle. "You look like him." Something snapped inside me then, fear or adrenaline or whatever, and I found I could move again. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. "I need to get help," I managed to say, my voice shaking. "You're hurt." She laughed, and it was the worst sound I've ever heard. "Help is coming. I can hear the horses." There haven't been horses on that property in decades. I don't know what made me do it, maybe some misguided sense of responsibility, or just plain stupidity. But I went around to the door of the cabin. I had to help her, knife or no knife, creepy eyes or not. She was hurt, dying maybe. The door wasn't locked. It swung open with a creak that seemed to echo forever. The smell hit me immediately. Not blood or decay like you might expect, but pine, fresh pine, like someone had just swept the floor with pine-scented cleaner, and the cabin was clean. Impossibly clean for a structure that had been abandoned for years. The floor was swept. There was a small table with a cloth on it and a rocking chair by a pot-bellied stove that shouldn't have been there. The stove was lit, explaining the smoke I'd seen. But there was no woman. No blood, no knife, nothing to indicate anyone had been there at all, let alone someone who had just stabbed herself right in front of me. I stood in the doorway, trying to process what I was seeing, or rather, what I wasn't seeing. The cabin looked lived in, but empty of people, like someone had just stepped out moments before I entered. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the quiet cabin. "Is anyone here?" Silence. Not even the sound of the fire crackling in the stove. I took a few steps inside, looking for any sign of the woman. Nothing. It was like she had never existed. Then I noticed something on the table, a photograph in an old wooden frame. I picked it up, hands shaking. It was a family portrait, yellowed with age. A man, a woman, and 3 children. The man was clearly my great-grandfather, William. I recognized him from other family photos. The woman standing beside him was the same woman I had just seen stab herself. The photograph had a date written on the back, October 15th, 1923, the same date as that day. I dropped the photo like it had burned me and backed out of the cabin. As soon as I was outside, I ran. I ran faster than I've ever run in my life, not stopping until I reached my grandparents' house, lungs burning and legs aching. Jake and Mitch were already there with my grandpa and dad, who were getting ready to come looking for me. They said Jake and Mitch had come back talking about strange noises and someone in the cabin, but they were so incoherent with fear that it was hard to understand exactly what had happened. When I told them what I'd seen, they didn't believe me. My dad thought I was making it up to scare my cousins. My grandpa was more concerned, but he suggested it might have been a hallucination. I've had migraines with auras before, visual disturbances that come before the headache. So he thought maybe that's what happened, but I know what I saw. And Jake and Mitch heard the noises too, which means it wasn't just in my head. My grandpa, dad, and Uncle Tim went to check out the cabin while I stayed at the house with my mom and cousins. When they came back, they said the cabin was exactly as it had been for years, dusty, cobwebbed, and empty. No clean floor, no stove, no table with a photograph, and certainly no sign of a woman with a knife. I've tried to make sense of what happened that day. I've researched my family history, looking for any mention of a woman who might have killed herself in those woods. So far, I've found nothing. My grandpa did tell me that William's first wife died under unfortunate circumstances before he remarried my great-grandmother, but he wouldn't elaborate. I haven't been back to the woods since then. I can't. Just thinking about that cabin makes my heart race and my hands shake. Sometimes when the house is quiet at night, I think I can hear her voice again. William always comes back. And the tree stand, it's back on the oak with the split trunk. My dad swears it was never moved. Story 11. I still can't explain what happened in our Sydney beach house back in 2011. Most days I try not to think about it, but every time I hear a cot squeak or see a baby's room, it all comes flooding back. My husband Mark and I had just moved into this gorgeous 2-story place in Coogee with our 6-month-old son, Liam. The house was a bit of a fixer-upper, but with the ocean view and the price we got it for, we couldn't say no. It was built in the 1940s and had that charming old house feel with wooden floors that creaked just enough to let you know they had history. The first few weeks were perfectly normal. We were busy painting walls, fixing cabinets, and settling in. Liam's room was the smallest bedroom upstairs, but it had this beautiful bay window that let in the morning light. I spent ages decorating it with a nautical theme, blue walls with little white anchors stenciled on, and a mobile with boats and fish hanging above his cot. The cot itself was this heavy oak thing my parents had given us. It was sturdy as hell and weighed a ton. Mark had nearly thrown his back out getting it up the stairs. We positioned it about 3 feet from the wall opposite the window, partly because I wanted to be able to walk around it easily for nighttime feedings, and partly because I'd read somewhere that keeping furniture away from walls was better for preventing dampness. It was about 3 weeks after we moved in when I first noticed something odd. I went to get Liam for his morning feed, and his cot was flush against the wall. I remember standing there completely confused. I was certain we'd left it where we always did, a good distance from the wall. Mark was still asleep, so I figured maybe he'd moved it the night before for some reason. When he woke up, I asked him about it casually. "Did you move Liam's cot last night?" He looked at me like I was speaking another language. Why would I move his cot in the middle of the night? I shrugged it off. Maybe I was misremembering. Sleep deprivation does weird things to your brain, and with a 6-month-old, I wasn't exactly getting full nights of rest. That evening, I made a point of checking the cot's position before going to bed. It was definitely 3 feet from the wall, just like we'd originally placed it. I even took a photo on my phone, thinking maybe I was going crazy. The next morning, the cot was against the wall again. I showed Mark the picture I'd taken the night before, and we both stood there staring at the cot, trying to make sense of it. Our first thought was that maybe the floor was sloped, causing the cot to slide. Mark grabbed a marble from Liam's toy box and put it on the floor where the cot had been. It didn't move an inch. Maybe it's the house settling, he suggested, though neither of us believed that could move something so heavy in such a specific way. That night, we moved the cot back to its original position and put a small piece of tape on the floor at each leg to mark its location. We both checked on it before going to bed, confirming it was where we'd left it. The next morning, the cot was against the wall again, and the tape markers were undisturbed on the floor where the legs had been. This meant the cot hadn't slid. It had somehow been lifted and moved. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Mark tried to be rational, suggesting that maybe one of us had sleepwalked and moved it without remembering. I'd never sleepwalked in my life, but I agreed to set up my phone to record the room that night. We put Liam down for the night, checked that the cot was in its usual spot, and I set my phone up on the dresser, recording. The battery died around 3 in the morning, but the footage until then showed nothing, just Liam sleeping peacefully in his cot, which remained stationary. Yet when I went in the next morning, there it was, pushed right up against the wall again. By this point, I was really starting to freak out. Mark was trying to stay logical, but I could tell he was unsettled too. We agreed to try one more test. That evening, we moved the cot to the very center of the room, as far from any wall as possible. Mark even measured the distance from each wall to make sure it was perfectly centered. We charged my phone fully and set it up to record again, and Mark set up his phone too, from a different angle. Both phones recorded all night this time. We reviewed the footage in the morning, and there was nothing, just Liam sleeping, the cot staying put. But when we walked into the room, the cot was against the same wall as always. The footage showed nothing unusual until the recording stopped. "This is impossible," Mark muttered, running his hand through his hair. "Things don't just move on their own." But they did. They were. We started experimenting, placing the cot in different positions each night, no matter where we put it, on the opposite side of the room, diagonally across against a different wall. Every morning, it would be back in the same spot, flush against that one particular wall. I was growing more anxious by the day. I started checking on Liam multiple times each night, and each time the cot would still be where we'd left it. Yet somehow, by morning, it would have moved. Mark suggested we try sleeping in the room with Liam, so we brought in an air mattress and took turns staying with him. The night I slept in there, I was so on edge that I barely closed my eyes. I kept staring at the cot, daring it to move. It didn't, but the next night, when it was Mark's turn, he swears he fell asleep for just an hour or two, and when he woke up, the cot had moved to the wall while he was right there in the room. That was when I started to really lose it. I didn't want Liam sleeping in that room anymore. We moved his cot into our bedroom that same day. For a week, nothing happened. The cot stayed exactly where we placed it in our room. I started to breathe a little easier, thinking maybe whatever it was had been specific to that room. Then one morning, I woke up to find the cot was no longer at the foot of our bed where we'd left it. It had moved across our bedroom and was now positioned against the wall that backed up to Liam's original room, the exact same wall it had been drawn to before, just on the other side. I screamed. I couldn't help it. Mark shot up in bed, and when he saw the cot, all the color drained from his face. "We need to talk to someone about this," I said, my voice shaking. "This isn't normal." Mark nodded, finally abandoning his attempts at finding logical explanations. We reached out to a local paranormal investigation group that weekend. I felt ridiculous making the call, but I was at my wit's end. They agreed to come to the house the following Friday to check things out. In the meantime, we moved Liam's cot downstairs to the living room, as far from that wall as possible. For 3 nights, It stayed put. On the fourth night, I went down for a glass of water at around 2 in the morning and found the cot in the process of moving. I still struggle to describe what I saw. The cot wasn't sliding or being pushed. It was lifting just slightly off the ground and then setting down an inch or two closer to the staircase. It moved so slowly that if I'd blinked, I might have missed it, but there was no mistaking what was happening. I stood frozen at the bottom of the stairs, too terrified to make a sound. The cot lifted again, moved another inch, and settled. Liam was sound asleep inside, completely undisturbed. Whatever was moving the cot was being gentle, careful not to wake him. I don't know how long I stood there watching this slow, deliberate movement before I finally managed to call out for Mark. By the time he came downstairs, the cot had stopped moving, but it was now several feet from where we'd left it, clearly on a path toward the staircase. We took Liam out of the cot and brought him into our bed. Neither of us slept for the rest of the night. We just lay there, holding our son between us, jumping at every creak and groan of the house. The next morning, I called the paranormal group and begged them to come sooner. They agreed to come that evening. The investigators arrived around 7. A middle-aged woman named Claire who had a kind face but serious eyes, and her partner, a younger man called Ryan, who carried all sorts of equipment. They listened to our story without a hint of disbelief, which was refreshing after all the doubtful looks we'd gotten from friends we'd confided in. "We've heard of objects moving before," Claire said, "but there's usually a pattern or reason behind it. Have you noticed anything else unusual in the house?" We hadn't, which seemed to surprise them. Typically, they explained, a haunting involved multiple types of phenomena. Noises, temperature changes, lights flickering. Our ghost, or whatever it was, seemed singularly focused on Liam's cot. They set up cameras and equipment throughout the house, focusing on the upstairs bedroom and the wall that seemed to be attracting the cot. They also did some research on the history of the house while they were there. What they found chilled me to the bone. In 1952, a family had lived in the house, parents and their 2 children, a 3-year-old boy and a baby girl. One night, the baby's cot had somehow caught fire. The parents managed to get their son out, but they couldn't reach the baby in time. The fire had started near the wall, the same wall that Liam's cot kept moving toward. Claire suggested that perhaps the spirit of the mother was trying to move Liam's cot away from where the fire had started, trying to protect him from suffering the same fate as her child. That night, we put the cot back in Liam's original room, but this time we placed it right against the infamous wall. The investigators had cameras rolling and were monitoring equipment for temperature changes or electromagnetic fluctuations. For the first time since it all began, the cot didn't move overnight. It stayed exactly where we'd put it, against the wall. The following night, we tried placing it in the center of the room again. By morning, it was back against the wall. Claire's theory seemed to make sense. Whatever was moving the cot wanted it against that specific wall, perhaps believing it was the safest place. We tried one final test. We put a note in the cot, a simple message. "Thank you for watching over Liam. He's safe now." That night, the cot moved halfway across the room and stopped, not against the wall, but not where we'd placed it either, as if the entity was uncertain. The next night, the cot didn't move at all, nor did it move the night after that, or any night since. I still don't know exactly what happened in our house. We stayed there for another year before moving closer to Mark's work, and during that time, the cot never moved again. But sometimes I'd wake up at night and swear I could hear the faintest sound of someone humming a lullaby coming from Liam's room, and on those nights, I didn't feel afraid. I felt like someone else was helping us keep watch, making sure our son was safe. Story 12. I've been hesitating to share this for a long time. Part of me is afraid of what people will think, but I'm more afraid of what happens when I'm alone in the hallway at night. I need to tell someone who might understand, because my dad sure as hell doesn't want to talk about it. I'm 21 now, living with my dad in Elmbrook, this small coastal town that's supposed to be peaceful. We've moved around a lot since he came back from Desert Storm. I was just a baby when he served, so I don't remember him being gone. What I do remember from as early as I can recall, is feeling deeply uncomfortable in my dad's bedroom. It's hard to explain if you've never felt it. The hair on your arms standing up, this pressure on your chest, and this overwhelming urge to get out whenever your back is to the door, like someone's watching you, like something's about to grab you. I always chalked it up to being a weird kid with an overactive imagination. When I was 12, we moved to a new apartment. Dad had a good job opportunity, and I was actually excited for a fresh start. The first few weeks were completely normal, unpacking, settling in, all that stuff. But then things started happening that I couldn't explain away. I'd come home from school, and all the kitchen cupboards would be open, not just one or two, every single one. Dad worked long hours, so I was home alone a lot. I'd close them all, then hear these bumping noises coming from his closet. Not like someone was inside, but more like something was shifting around in there. When I'd check, nothing would be disturbed. The worst was when I was doing homework in my room one afternoon. I heard the distinct sound of my dad's bedroom door opening. The hinges had this specific creak. I called out thinking he'd come home early, but no answer. When I went to check, the door was wide open and nobody was there. I remember standing frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told my dad, but he just gave me this look. Not like he thought I was lying, but like he knew exactly what I was talking about and didn't want to discuss it. He'd just say, "Close the door and leave it alone, Ethan." Things calmed down when we moved to a condo about a year later. For months, nothing happened. I started to feel normal again, started sleeping through the night. Then, as we were packing to move yet again, it all came rushing back. I was helping my dad pack up his bedroom closet when I found this box. It looked like it might hold comic books or something, and being a curious teenager, I opened it when he wasn't around. Inside wasn't comics. It was stuff my dad had brought back from Kuwait, war souvenirs. There was this old gas mask that gave me the creeps instantly. Dad later told me he'd taken it from a POW. There were other things too. Weathered items with Arabic writing, small trinkets, and things I couldn't identify. I just remember the overwhelming feeling of wrongness when I touched them. When I asked my dad about it, he got really quiet, then said, "Some things are better left alone, Ethan. Pack it up." Our third home was this 2-story house with more space than we needed. During unpacking, I noticed my dad put that box in the guest bedroom. I had always liked that room before. It had great natural light and felt peaceful. The day that box went in there, I couldn't stay in that room for more than a few minutes without feeling physically sick. Not like I was going to throw up, but like my body was rejecting being in that space. The activity ramped up quickly after that. I'd hear these low-toned sounds coming from downstairs when I was in my room, almost like throat singing, but distorted. Footsteps would move throughout the house when Dad was at work. The temperature would fluctuate wildly, freezing cold one minute, then uncomfortably warm the next, especially in the hallway near the guest room. My girlfriend at the time, Melissa, experienced it too. She came over one night when my dad was working late. We were in my room watching a movie when she needed to use the bathroom. A few minutes later, she came back looking terrified. She said she couldn't open my bedroom door to get back in. The knob turned, but it felt like something was holding it shut from my side. When she finally pushed through, there was nothing there. I hadn't moved from the bed. We ended up moving again last year to where we are now. It's a smaller place, just 1 story, but in a better neighborhood. Dad put that damn box in the new guest bedroom again. Within days, both Melissa and I started seeing shadow figures around that room. The first time, I thought it was just my eyes playing tricks on me. I was walking to the kitchen late one night and saw something dark move in my peripheral vision. When I turned, there was nothing there. Then it started happening regularly. Melissa saw them too. Dark shapes that seemed to watch us from doorways, always disappearing when we tried to look directly at them. 2 months ago, I had the most terrifying experience of my life. I woke up around 3 in the morning needing to use the bathroom. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed something peeking out from the guest bedroom door frame. It was a shadow, but solid somehow, blacker than the darkness around it. It was short, maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, and it was leaning out at this weird 45-degree angle, like it was checking to see if anyone was coming. When it saw me, it slowly retreated into the room. My entire body went cold. I couldn't move for what felt like forever. I finally forced myself to go to the bathroom, turning on every light along the way. When I came back, I nearly collapsed. The shadow was there again, but now it was taller, at least 6 feet, with half its body emerging from the doorway. It had no features I could make out, just this intense darkness that seemed to absorb the light around it. I ran back to my room and didn't come out until morning. I didn't tell my dad. What would I even say? "Hey Dad, I think something followed you home from Kuwait and it's living in our guest room." That same night, Melissa stayed over. She sleeps on the couch when she stays. Around 4 in the morning, she woke up to use the bathroom and saw the light on in the guest room with the door half open. She knew no one had gone in there. When she came back from the bathroom, the light was off and the door was closed. We've both seen the bathroom lights turn on by themselves. We've heard scratching inside the walls. I've woken up with unexplained bruises on my arms, like someone grabbed me in my sleep. Last week, I finally worked up the courage to go into the guest room when my dad was at work. I wanted to look at that box again, to see if there was anything I missed. The box was there, but it was different. The items inside were arranged neatly, as if someone had been going through them regularly. The gas mask was sitting on top, and I swear it wasn't like that before. As I stood there, I felt the temperature drop dramatically. My breath fogged in front of my face. Then I heard it. This low, guttural sound coming from behind me. Not quite a growl, not quite a word, but something in between. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. I just ran. I don't feel welcome in my own home anymore. I feel like I'm being watched constantly. The shadows in the hallway have gotten more frequent. Sometimes I'll be sitting in the living room and catch a glimpse of something standing in the doorway, just watching me. When I look directly at it, it's gone. I've tried talking to my dad about getting rid of the box, but he refuses. He gets this distant look in his eyes, almost afraid, and changes the subject. I'm starting to think he knows exactly what's happening. Maybe he's been dealing with this since he came back from the war. Maybe that's why we keep moving. Last night was the worst yet. I was alone. Dad was on an overnight shift and Melissa was at her parents'. Around midnight, all the power went out, not just in our house, but the whole block. I used my phone flashlight to navigate to the kitchen for candles. As I was heading back to my room, I heard footsteps behind me, heavy, deliberate steps that didn't sound like bare feet or shoes, more like something dragging itself forward. I turned around and saw nothing, but the footsteps continued. Then the temperature dropped so rapidly I could see my breath. My phone flashlight started flickering, then went out completely. In the darkness, I heard whispering in a language I didn't understand. It sounded like Arabic, but distorted, like it was being spoken underwater. Then I felt it. Something brushed against my back. Not like a hand, but like fabric. Rough, dry fabric. I ran to my room and locked the door, huddling under my blankets like a little kid. The footsteps followed me to my door and stopped. For hours, I just lay there, listening. Around 4 in the morning, I heard the guest room door slam shut, then silence. The power came back on at sunrise. When I finally worked up the courage to leave my room, I found wet footprints in the hallway. Not water, something darker, almost oily. They led from the guest room to my bedroom door, then disappeared. I'm writing this now because I don't know what else to do. I'm convinced that something came back with my dad from Desert Storm. Something attached to those items in that box. I've researched online about war trophies and objects carrying spiritual attachments, especially from regions with deep cultural beliefs about jinn and other entities. It's almost midnight now. Dad's asleep in his room. I can hear movement in the guest bedroom again, that shuffling, dragging sound. Sometimes it stops at my door and just waits. I don't know what it wants. I don't know if it's getting stronger or if I'm just becoming more aware of it. All I know is that box needs to go. Those items need to be returned or destroyed or whatever it takes to make this stop. I'm afraid of what might happen if we ignore it any longer. I haven't told Melissa everything. She knows something's wrong, but not the extent of it. She's staying over tomorrow night, and I'm terrified of what might happen. What if it decides to do more than just watch? Wait, I just heard the guest room door open. The footsteps are in the hallway now. They've never come out this early before. They're stopping outside my door. I can see the shadow of feet blocking the light from the hallway. The doorknob is turning. I have to go. Story 13. I never thought I'd be sharing this online, but I need to tell someone who might understand or have experienced something similar. I'm still trying to process what happened in my apartment in Black Creek, and honestly, I'm still pretty freaked out about it. I moved to Black Creek, Wisconsin, back in August. It's this tiny place in the middle of nowhere, but I needed somewhere quiet after everything that happened in my old city. The apartment seemed perfect. Affordable rent, allowed pets, and far enough from neighbors that I could finally get some peace. I brought my cat Luna, who's been with me for 5 years now. She's usually super chill, which becomes important to this whole story. I should probably mention that I've always been able to see things others can't. Since I was a kid, I'd catch glimpses of figures or shadows in my peripheral vision. My parents thought I was making it up for attention, and I eventually learned to keep quiet about it. But what happened in Black Creek was different, more intense and specific than anything I'd experienced before. About 2 months after moving in, so around October, the weird stuff started. I woke up in the middle of the night, it must have been around 3 in the morning, and saw a tall, dark figure standing by my kitchen sink. It wasn't like a normal shadow. It had substance but no features, just this black mass vaguely shaped like a person. I froze, completely unable to move, while my heart felt like it would burst from my chest. After what seemed like forever, but was probably only a few seconds, I blinked, and it was gone. I told myself it was just my eyes playing tricks on me in the dark. I got up, turned on every light in the apartment, checked all the locks twice, and eventually managed to fall back asleep with Luna curled up next to me. The next night, I had a few glasses of wine before bed and nothing happened. I slept straight through until morning, but the night after that, completely sober, I woke up again to the sound of something moving in my bathroom. It wasn't loud, just subtle shuffling and what sounded like water running very faintly. When I got up to check, turning on lights as I went, the noise stopped immediately. The bathroom was empty and everything was dry. This pattern continued for weeks. On nights when I drank before bed, even just 1 beer, nothing happened. But on sober nights, I'd wake up to something. Noises from different rooms, that shadow figure by the sink, or just an overwhelming feeling that someone else was in the apartment with me. I started drinking more frequently before bed just to get some peace, which I know isn't healthy, but I was desperate for uninterrupted sleep. Then came the incident with the kitchen cabinets. I'd gone to bed sober around 11, and Luna was curled up at my feet as usual. Around 2:30 in the morning, I woke up needing to use the bathroom. From my bed, I had a clear view into my kitchen, and every single cabinet door was wide open, all of them. I'm talking about 12 cabinets, all perfectly open to about the same angle. I immediately thought someone had broken in, but Luna was still peacefully sleeping, and she goes crazy whenever anyone new enters the apartment. Plus, all my doors and windows were still locked from the inside. I got up, closed all the cabinets, and tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I tried closing my bedroom door that night to block the view of the kitchen, but Luna started scratching at it and howling until I opened it again. She'd never done that before. She usually doesn't care if doors are closed. But that night, she was adamant about keeping that door open, which honestly terrified me even more. After that night, I called my sister, Emily. We've always been close, and she's the only one who never dismissed my sightings growing up. She doesn't see things like I do, but she has these incredibly vivid dreams that sometimes come true. Premonitions, I guess. She agreed to visit for the weekend, which was a huge relief. I was starting to feel like I was losing my mind. About a week before Emily was supposed to arrive, she called me in the middle of the night, totally freaked out. She said she'd woken up screaming from a nightmare about me. In her dream, she was watching me sleep from above, like she was floating near the ceiling, and there was something dark moving around my apartment. She couldn't see what it was clearly, but she knew it wasn't human, and that it was focused on me. At the time, I tried to reassure her it was just a bad dream, but now I'm not so sure. Emily arrived on Friday afternoon. I hadn't told her about the shadow figure or the cabinets. I didn't want to scare her or influence what she might experience. That first night, nothing happened. We stayed up late catching up, had some wine, and slept peacefully. The second night was different. We both went to bed around midnight, completely sober. Emily was sleeping on the pull-out couch in my living room, which is partially visible from my bedroom if the door is open, which it was, thanks to Luna's weird insistence. I fell asleep quickly but woke suddenly at 3:27. I remember looking at my phone's glowing numbers, feeling disoriented. That's when I saw it. Hovering directly over Emily on the couch was this thing. It's so hard to describe because it didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. The closest I can come is that it had the face of a harpy, like those mythological bird women, but instead of a body, it was this twisting, spiraling shape like a DNA strand, about a foot long. It was moving around Emily's head, seemingly pecking or probing at her. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. Then Emily suddenly sat bolt upright, staring directly at the thing. Our eyes met across the room, and I knew. She was seeing exactly what I was seeing. I swear to God I'm seeing it right now, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Emily's response wasn't what I expected. Instead of panicking, she said, "It's okay. Come here and think about a big ball of light around you." Her voice was shaking but controlled. I practically jumped from my bed to the couch. The thing hovered above us for a few more seconds, then seemed to dissolve into the air. We sat there holding each other, both trembling. "Did you see it?" I finally asked. "The bird face thing?" "Yes," she said. I woke up feeling like something was touching my face. When I opened my eyes, it was right there, looking at me. It had these dark, empty eye sockets, but I could feel it studying me. We stayed up the rest of the night with all the lights on, trying to make sense of what we'd both experienced. Emily told me that in her family's culture, our mom is half Mexican, there are stories about spirits that take unusual forms when they're trying to communicate something important. She didn't think the entity was evil, necessarily, but that it might be a warning. But a warning about what? I hadn't done anything to disturb any spirits. I hadn't used Ouija boards or done rituals or anything like that. I'm just a normal person who moved to a quiet town and suddenly found myself in the middle of something I couldn't explain. The next morning, Emily and I sage-smudged the entire apartment. We opened all the windows despite the cold October air and recited a prayer Emily remembered from our grandmother. The apartment felt lighter afterward, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever we saw wasn't gone, just waiting. Emily had to leave that Sunday evening. Before she left, she made me promise to call her immediately if anything else happened and suggested I look into the history of the building or the land it was built on. She also left me a small bag of protective herbs to keep under my pillow and some salt to line my doorways and windows. That night, alone again except for Luna, I did some research online about the area. Black Creek itself doesn't have much recorded history, but I discovered that the land my apartment complex sits on used to be farmland owned by a family named Peterson back in the 1940s. The records showed that the family abandoned the property suddenly in 1948, with no explanation given. The land remained unused until the apartments were built in the early 2000s. I tried to sleep that night with every light in the apartment on. Luna was unusually restless, pacing back and forth between my bedroom and the living room. Around 2 in the morning, I felt myself drifting off despite my anxiety, when Luna suddenly jumped onto the bed, fur standing on end, staring intently at my bedroom doorway. I followed her gaze and saw the shadow figure again, but this time, it wasn't by the sink. It was standing in my doorway, more solid than before, and it was moving slowly toward my bed. I couldn't move or scream. Classic sleep paralysis, I thought at first. But then Luna hissed at it, confirming this wasn't just in my head. The figure stopped at the foot of my bed. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then it raised what seemed like an arm and pointed toward my window. Just as I managed to turn my head to look, all the lights in my apartment went out simultaneously. When I looked back, the figure was gone. I spent the rest of that night huddled in my bathroom with Luna, the only room without windows, with the door locked and lights on, thankfully on a different circuit that hadn't been affected. When morning finally came, I called my landlord about the electricity, but he said there hadn't been any power outages reported in the area. That was 2 days ago. I haven't seen the shadow figure or the bird-faced entity since, but I feel them waiting. I can't explain what's happening or why, but I know it's real. Emily saw it too. I don't have a history of mental illness. I'm not particularly stressed, and I've cut out alcohol completely to stay alert. I'm writing this now because I need to know if anyone else has experienced something similar or has any insight into what these entities might want from me. Is it a warning, a threat, some kind of message I'm failing to understand? I've considered moving, but something tells me these things didn't come with the apartment. They came with me, and they'll follow me wherever I go until I figure out what they're trying to tell me. Story 14. I don't believe in ghosts. I need to say that up front. I'm a logical person who needs evidence before believing in something. But what happened to me and my family when I was 6 years old, I still can't explain it. I've tried for years to rationalize it, but I can't. And the worst part? It wasn't just me who experienced it. It was my entire family. My mom, stepdad, older brother, and I moved into this 2-story house on the corner of a quiet neighborhood in the spring of 1997. I remember it was a pretty standard-looking place from the outside. White siding, black shutters, nothing spectacular or creepy about it. The house number was 404, which became kind of ironic later given the error connotations. The day we moved in, this weird thing happened that didn't seem important at the time. The realtor, this middle-aged woman with overly teased hair, was doing the final walkthrough with my parents. I was bouncing around, excited about my new room, when I heard her tell my stepdad something odd. "Just so you know," she said in this hushed voice that made me stop and listen, "don't remove the paper roses taped to the walls upstairs. It's just part of the agreement." My stepdad laughed it off. He was a no-nonsense kind of guy who didn't take kindly to being told what to do in his own house. The moment the realtor left, he went around tearing down these dried paper roses that were taped in random spots throughout the upstairs hallway and bedrooms. There were maybe 8 or 9 of them total. I remember thinking they looked pretty, made of this deep red paper, carefully folded. My stepdad crumpled them up and tossed them in the trash without a second thought. "Superstitious nonsense," he muttered. The first few weeks were normal. We unpacked, settled in, and I started going to my new school. But then things began to happen, small things at first. It started on a Tuesday. I remember because we had art class that day and I was excited to get home and show my mum the clay pot I'd made. I got off the school bus and walked the short distance to our house. My mom worked until 5 and my brother had basketball practice, so I had a key to let myself in. The moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air was heavy, like right before a thunderstorm. I called out, "Hello?" even though I knew nobody would answer. The sound echoed through the empty house. I was hanging up my backpack when I heard it. Footsteps upstairs, right above me in my brother's room. Not just a creak or a settling noise, but deliberate footsteps. Back and forth, back and forth. Pacing, I froze. My heart started pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. The footsteps continued, slow and methodical. I bolted out the front door and ran to our neighbor's house. I told them I'd forgotten my key. I was too embarrassed to say I was scared, and they let me stay until my mom got home. I never told her what happened. I figured it was just my imagination. But it wasn't just me. My aunt and uncle had moved into our basement temporarily while they looked for a new place. The basement was finished with a small bedroom and bathroom, so it worked out well. About 3 weeks after we moved in, my aunt called my mom at work, hysterical. "There's someone in the house," she screamed into the phone. My mom later told me she could barely understand her. I can hear them walking around upstairs. My mom rushed home to find my aunt sitting in her car in the driveway, refusing to go back inside. My aunt swore she'd heard heavy footsteps walking from the kitchen to the living room and back again, over and over. She'd called out thinking it was me or my brother homesick from school, but when no one answered, she checked the garage. No cars were there except hers. My aunt and uncle moved out the next day. They didn't even say goodbye. Then there was Bear, our German shepherd. He was a brave dog, protective, alert, never scared of anything, but he refused to go upstairs in that house. He'd follow us to the bottom of the stairs and then sit, whining. Sometimes he'd bark at nothing, his eyes fixed on the top of the staircase. Other times he'd stand at my brother's bedroom door, growling, the hair on his back standing straight up. One Saturday afternoon, about 2 months after we moved in, my brother had his friend Tyler over. They were 12, and I was the annoying 6-year-old sister who wanted to tag along. Surprisingly, they let me join their game of hide and seek. Tyler was it first, and I hid in my closet behind some boxes. I heard Tyler counting downstairs, then the sound of him searching for us. After a few minutes, I heard my brother yell, "You found me," and then their footsteps as they looked for me. I was about to jump out and surprise them when I heard a faint scratching sound coming from the wall behind me. I froze, listening. It sounded like fingernails dragging slowly across the other side of the drywall. I scrambled out of the closet and ran smack into my brother and Tyler in the hallway. "I win. You didn't find me," I said, trying to hide how freaked out I was. But Tyler wasn't listening. He was pale, his eyes wide. "I'm not playing anymore," he said, his voice shaking. My brother asked him what was wrong, and Tyler just shook his head. Later, when Tyler thought I couldn't hear, he told my brother what had happened. He'd been hiding in the spare bedroom closet when he saw footprints appear in the carpet next to him. Not footprints like someone had walked there before. Footprints that were forming in real time, pressing down into the carpet one after another, coming toward him. Then he felt hot breath on his ear, and a woman's voice whispered something he couldn't understand. After Tyler left, saying he didn't feel good, my brother and I went exploring. We had this half-finished storage space off the basement that we'd never really looked at before. In the back corner, on a concrete wall, we found writing. It looked like it had been scratched into the cement with something sharp. "These roses shall not be removed. They keep her spirit at bay. I say goodbye, for I'll kill myself today." We told our parents, who brushed it off as previous owners' kids being creepy. Tyler never came over again. The worst incident, the one that finally made us move, happened on a Friday night about 4 months after we moved in. My stepdad's cousin was visiting from out of town and sleeping on our couch. Around 2 in the morning, he burst into my parents' room, practically in tears. "There's something in the kids' room," he said. My parents, annoyed at being woken up, followed him to my bedroom. I was sound asleep, unaware of what was happening. According to what they told me later, they stood in the doorway watching as my blanket slowly lifted off me, hovered for a second, then settled back down. It happened again and again. Then on the 4th time, the blanket was yanked completely off the bed and thrown to the floor. Before my parents could react, I was suddenly lifted up and thrown across the room. Not like I rolled over or fell, like someone picked me up and threw me. I woke up when I hit the wall, confused and crying. There was a bruise on my back the next day in the shape of what looked like fingers. We moved out the following week. My parents didn't even try to sell the house. They just broke the lease and left. We stayed with my grandparents until they found a new place. Years later, when I was in high school, curiosity got the better of me, and I researched the history of House 404. What I found made my blood run cold. In the 1970s, a newlywed couple had moved in. 3 days after their wedding, the husband killed his wife in a jealous rage, believing she was cheating on him. He hid her body in a sealed crawl space inside the master bedroom closet, the same closet where I'd heard the scratching. He then hung himself in what had been my brother's bedroom. The most disturbing part: the wife had been 2 months pregnant when she died. And the paper roses, they were from their wedding. Apparently, A previous owner had discovered that keeping the roses in place seemed to keep the paranormal activity at bay. My family rarely talks about what happened in that house. It's been over 20 years, but I still have nightmares about being thrown across the room by invisible hands. I still don't believe in ghosts, not really, but I don't have a rational explanation for what happened to us in House 404. Sometimes I drive by the old neighborhood when I visit my hometown. The house is still there, looking completely normal from the outside. I wonder if the current residents know what happened there. I wonder if they've experienced anything strange. I wonder if anyone told them about the roses. I wonder if they've heard the footsteps or the scratching in the walls, or felt the rage of a woman whose life and future were stolen from her. A rage that seemed to focus on me, a child the same age her baby would have been if it had lived. I hope not, because whatever was in that house wasn't just a ghost story or my imagination. It was real, and it was angry. Story 15. I never thought I'd be sharing this, but I need to get it off my chest. Maybe someone here has experienced something similar and can help me make sense of it all. I grew up in Rosewood, a town so small you'd miss it if you blinked while driving through. My childhood home is a modest 2-story house with a finished basement where my mom sleeps, or used to sleep, I should say. Yesterday I stopped by to drop off some groceries for her. I have my own place now, about 20 minutes away, but I visit at least twice a week. Usually I knock out of courtesy, but she was expecting me, so I just walked in. What I found immediately struck me as odd. My mom was fast asleep on the living room couch, wrapped in her favorite quilt, the one with the faded sunflower pattern my grandmother made. I gently woke her, and she seemed disoriented, not just from being suddenly awakened, but like she hadn't planned to fall asleep there. "Mom, why are you sleeping up here?" I asked, setting the grocery bags on the coffee table. She rubbed her eyes and sat up slowly. "Oh, Margaret, I didn't hear you come in." "Why aren't you in your room? Is everything okay?" She hesitated, and I recognized that look, the one she gets when she's about to tell me something she thinks I might not believe. "I saw it again last night," she said quietly. My stomach dropped. "Saw what?" "That light, the one I told you about before. It was hovering right above my dresser." I sat down beside her, the ancient springs of our old couch groaning under the additional weight. "What did it look like exactly?" "Like a ball, about the size of a grapefruit. Not bright, more like a dim glow, bluish-white. It just hung there, perfectly still, for maybe 10 seconds. Then it drifted toward the ceiling and faded away." She pulled the quilt tighter around herself. "I know how it sounds, Margaret, but I wasn't dreaming." I believed her. That's the thing. Anyone else would have suggested she had a bad dream or was seeing things, but I knew better. The basement bedroom where my mum sleeps has always been unnaturally dark. There's only one tiny window near the ceiling, and even that's covered with heavy blackout blinds. My stepdad insisted on covering every source of light down there, even putting black electrical tape over the tiny LED on her computer monitor. There's no way any external light could have created what she saw. "Did you feel anything when you saw it?" I asked. "Cold. Not just regular cold, but like something was pulling the warmth right out of me." She shivered at the memory. "I didn't feel threatened exactly, but I couldn't stay down there another minute." I nodded, understanding completely. We've never felt genuinely threatened in this house, despite everything we've experienced, and we've experienced plenty. The first incident I can clearly remember happened when I was around 8 years old. I woke up in the middle of the night, desperately needing to use the bathroom. As I stumbled down the hallway, half asleep, I saw what looked like a woman in a pale dress standing at the end of the corridor. I remember freezing, my heart pounding, but not feeling scared, just surprised. When I blinked, she was gone. I told my mom the next morning, and instead of dismissing me, she gave me this long, searching look before asking, what did she look like? From then on, we started comparing notes, books that would relocate themselves. The smell of vanilla suddenly filling a room when nothing was baking. The sound of footsteps upstairs when we were both downstairs. The TV turning on by itself in the middle of the night, always to static. Over time, these occurrences became so commonplace that we actually gave our ghost a nickname, Rosie. It seemed fitting, given our town's name and the faint smell of roses that sometimes accompanied the strange happenings. "Do you think it's Rosie again?" I asked my mom yesterday. "Who else would it be?" She sighed. "She's been more active lately. Last week I found all the cabinet doors in the kitchen wide open when I came home from work. And the day before that, my reading glasses ended up in the refrigerator." The refrigerator, Margaret. I never take my glasses in the kitchen. I couldn't help but smile a little. These antics seemed almost playful, like a child trying to get attention. "Remember when my hairbrush went missing for 3 days and then suddenly appeared in the middle of my bed?" I said. Mom nodded, smiling too. "Or when all the photos in the hallway turned upside down overnight." We sat there reminiscing about our ghost's greatest hits, the fear from earlier melting away. That's how it's always been with Rosie. Momentary fright followed by a kind of bemused acceptance. But as we talked, something occurred to me. "The light you saw last night, that's new, isn't it?" Her smile faded. "Yes, that's only started in the last month or so, 3 times now." "Always in your bedroom?" "No, that's the thing. The first time was in the laundry room. I was folding clothes, and suddenly there it was, just hovering between me and the dryer. The second time was in the upstairs bathroom, right above the sink while I was brushing my teeth." I felt a chill run down my spine. Rosie had never manifested as anything visible before, at least not since that one time I thought I saw a woman in the hallway as a child. "Maybe she's trying to communicate something more directly," I suggested. Mom shrugged. "Maybe. But what?" I spent the rest of the afternoon with her, helping put away groceries and doing some light cleaning. Neither of us mentioned Rosie again, but I kept finding myself glancing into corners and shadows, half expecting to see that dim ball of light. As evening approached, I could tell my mom was getting anxious about going back to her bedroom. "Stay here tonight," she suggested, as I was gathering my things to leave. "We could watch a movie, order pizza." I hesitated. I had work early the next morning, but the look in her eyes made me reconsider. "Okay, let me just grab my overnight bag from the car." As I stepped onto the porch, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across our front yard. The old oak tree my grandfather planted decades ago creaked in the light breeze. Everything looked so normal, so mundane. It was hard to reconcile this peaceful scene with the strangeness inside. Back inside, Mom had already called the pizza place and was setting up the living room for our impromptu movie night. I headed upstairs to my old bedroom to change into something more comfortable. My room remains largely unchanged from when I lived here. Same twin bed with the purple comforter, same desk where I struggled through high school homework, same band posters on the walls that I now find slightly embarrassing. It's like a time capsule of teenage Margaret. As I was changing, I felt a sudden drop in temperature. The hairs on my arms stood up and my breath fogged in front of my face. I froze, watching as my breath clouded the air. "Mom?" I called out, but there was no answer. Then I saw it. Exactly as she had described, a dim bluish-white orb of light, about the size of a grapefruit, hovering near my old desk. It pulsed gently, like it was breathing. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. Instead, I felt an overwhelming sense of curiosity and, strangely, recognition. Like seeing an old friend after many years. "Rosie," I whispered. The light pulsed brighter for a moment, then dimmed again. It began to drift toward me, moving slowly and deliberately. I stood my ground, heart racing, but not from fear. When it was about 2 feet away from me, it stopped. We faced each other, me and this impossible thing, in perfect silence. Then it started to change shape, elongating and becoming more diffuse, like mist. For a split second, I thought I could make out the outline of a face within the light, a woman's face, young and sad. Then my mom called up from downstairs, "Margaret, pizza's here." I blinked, and the light was gone. The room instantly returned to normal temperature. I stood there for several moments, trying to process what had just happened. It wasn't my imagination. The experience had been too vivid, too physical. The cold, the light, the face. It was real. I went downstairs, my legs feeling shaky. Mom took one look at me and knew. "You saw it," she said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, sinking onto the couch. In my old room, it changed shape. I think I saw a face. Mom sat down beside me, pizza forgotten. I've never seen a face. What did it look like? Young. A woman. She looked sad. I swallowed hard. "Mom, I don't think Rosie is just some random spirit. I think she's connected to this house, to this land somehow. But we've lived here for over 20 years. Wouldn't we have figured that out by now?" I shrugged. Maybe she's only now able to show herself more clearly. Maybe something's changed. We spent the rest of the evening theorizing, picking at cold pizza. We recalled every strange incident we could remember, looking for patterns or clues we might have missed. But nothing seemed to explain the recent escalation in activity or the appearance of the light orb. When it was time for bed, neither of us wanted to sleep alone. We ended up camping out in the living room like we used to do when I was little and there was a thunderstorm. Mom took the couch and I made a nest of blankets on the floor. As I lay there trying to fall asleep, listening to my mom's steady breathing, I couldn't stop thinking about the face I'd seen in the light. There had been something familiar about it, though I couldn't place it. Not someone I knew exactly, but someone I felt I should know. I must have drifted off eventually, because I woke with a start in the early hours of the morning. The living room was pitch black, except for a soft glow coming from the hallway leading to the kitchen. I sat up, fully alert now. "Mom?" I whispered, but she was still asleep on the couch. The glow in the hallway pulsed, beckoning. Against all better judgment, I got up and followed it. In the kitchen, the orb of light hovered above the center island. As I entered, it drifted toward the basement door, which slowly swung open. The message was clear. It wanted me to follow. I hesitated at the top of the basement stairs. The light floated down, illuminating the way. Step by step, I descended into the darkness, guided only by that gentle glow. In my mom's bedroom, the orb moved to hover over her dresser, exactly where she'd seen it the night before. Then it expanded, filling the room with soft light, revealing every detail with perfect clarity. And there, reflected in the dresser mirror, was not my face, but the face from the orb. Young, sad, and now clearly recognizable from old family photos. My grandmother, who died in this house before I was born. The light flickered once, twice, and vanished, plunging me back into darkness. I fumbled for the light switch, my heart pounding. When the overhead light came on, everything looked normal. Just a basement bedroom, cluttered with my mom's things. But on the dresser, perfectly centered where the orb had been, was a small, tarnished silver locket I'd never seen before. I picked it up with trembling fingers and opened it. Inside was a tiny photograph of my grandmother, much younger than in any picture I'd seen of her, holding a baby, my mom. I'm back at my apartment now, the locket sitting on my desk as I type this. I still have no idea where it came from or why it appeared now. Mom didn't recognize it either when I showed her this morning. All I know is that whatever or whoever has been sharing our house all these years, it isn't malevolent. Maybe it's been trying to reach out all along, in the only ways it could. I'm going back to the house tonight. Maybe Rosie has more to show us. Maybe there are other treasures hidden away, other messages waiting to be discovered. I'll update if anything else happens. Has anyone else experienced something like this? A presence that feels more like a guardian than something to fear? Story 16. I still get goosebumps thinking about what happened at our little church in Flint back in '98. Most people wouldn't believe me if I told them, but I need to get this off my chest. I've been a deacon at Cornerstone Baptist for almost 15 years now, and I've seen folks come and go, but nothing, and I mean nothing, compares to what happened with Valerie. Our church isn't anything fancy, just a small brick building with about 15 to 20 regular members on a good Sunday. Pastor Mitchell's a good man, straightforward with his preaching and genuinely cares about the congregation. We're like family there. I remember when Valerie and her husband Tom first started showing up. Must have been early spring of '98. They seemed normal enough. Tom was this burly guy who worked at the auto plant, and Valerie was this tiny woman, couldn't have weighed more than 95 pounds soaking wet. She had this long brown hair she always wore pulled back, and these intense eyes that seemed to look right through you. They sat in the middle rows at first, always polite, shaking hands during greeting time. After a few weeks, Valerie started talking more with the ladies after service. My wife Debbie mentioned that Valerie had expressed interest in joining our Bible study. Everything seemed fine, normal even. But looking back, there were signs I should have picked up on. For one, Valerie always wore these weird pendants, different ones each week. She'd touch them constantly during service, especially during prayer. And sometimes when Pastor Mitchell would read certain Bible verses, I'd catch her flinching or shifting uncomfortably in her seat. At the time, I just figured she was new to church and getting used to things. Then one Wednesday night after Bible study, Valerie approached Pastor Mitchell. I was helping clean up, so I overheard bits of their conversation. She was talking about wanting to leave her old life behind and fully commit to Christ. Pastor seemed pleased, of course. That's what we all want to hear. What none of us knew, what we couldn't have possibly known, was that Valerie wasn't just some casual churchgoer trying to find faith. She came from a long line of witches, not the Halloween costume kind, but the real deal. Her grandmother, mother, aunts, all of them practiced what they called the craft, and Valerie had been deep in it her whole life. The first real sign something was wrong came about a month after Valerie's conversation with Pastor. She missed 3 Sundays in a row, which was unusual since she and Tom had been so regular. We put her on the prayer list, thinking maybe she was sick. On the 4th Sunday, Tom came alone, looking exhausted and worried. After service, he pulled Pastor Mitchell aside. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but when you're locking up the piano and someone's voice gets all urgent like Tom's did, you notice. He was telling Pastor that Valerie wanted to come to church, but she physically couldn't. Every Sunday morning, like clockwork, she'd start violently throwing up about an hour before service time. It would continue until church would be over. Tom thought it was just some weird bug at first, but it only happened on Sundays and only before church. Pastor Mitchell suggested they pray about it and offered to visit their home that week. Tom seemed relieved and agreed. I didn't hear anything more until the next deacons meeting when Pastor filled us in. What he told us chilled me to the bone. When he visited their home, Valerie finally opened up about her past. She explained that her family had practiced black magic for generations. Her grandmother had taught her how to use various spell books, Ouija boards, tarot cards, crystals, you name it. Valerie admitted she'd consulted her Ouija board daily for decades, asking it what to wear, what to eat, even what route to take to the grocery store. Her entire life had been guided by these things. But after coming to our church and hearing pastors' sermons about Jesus being the only way to salvation, she decided to give it all up. She'd packed away her Ouija board, her crystals, her tarot cards, everything. And that's when the trouble started. First came the vomiting before church. Then she started seeing things, dark figures moving around her house, especially at night. She'd wake up with unexplained scratches on her arms and back. Objects would move on their own. Doors would slam shut when there wasn't any breeze. The television would turn on by itself in the middle of the night, always to static. Pastor Mitchell believed she was experiencing spiritual warfare. He suggested that by turning to Christ and rejecting her occult practices, she'd angered whatever spirits she'd been communicating with all those years. The next Sunday, Valerie attempted to come to church again. I'll never forget seeing her walk in, pale as a ghost, clutching a plastic bucket. She sat in the very back row, and throughout the entire service, she was sick. Not just a little queasy, I mean violently ill, retching into that bucket while Tom sat beside her, rubbing her back. But she refused to leave. She was determined to be there, even through all that suffering. This went on for 3 more Sundays. Each time, Valerie looked worse, thinner, more exhausted, with dark circles under her eyes. but she kept coming, kept fighting through it. Finally, Pastor Mitchell called an emergency meeting with the deacons. He explained the situation in detail and suggested that what we were dealing with might be an actual case of possession. Most of us were skeptical at first. I mean, you hear about these things in movies, not in real life, and certainly not in our little Baptist church in Flint. But Pastor reminded us of the scriptures about casting out demons and how Jesus had given believers authority over evil spirits. After much prayer and discussion, we agreed to help Valerie through what Pastor carefully termed a deliverance service. We didn't call it an exorcism. That seemed too Catholic, too dramatic for our Baptist sensibilities. But that's what it was. The first step was to go to Valerie and Tom's house and remove all the occult items. 5 of us went, Pastor Mitchell, myself, and 3 other deacons. What we found was shocking. Their attic was full of boxes containing everything from ancient-looking leather-bound books with strange symbols to crystals, pendants, candles, and a collection of Ouija boards that gave me the creeps just looking at them. The whole time we were gathering these items, the house felt wrong. The air was heavy, oppressive. It was the middle of the afternoon, but it seemed dark inside no matter how many lights we turned on. At one point, I was boxing up some books when I felt something brush against the back of my neck. I turned around, but nobody was there. Tom was in the kitchen with Pastor, and the other guys were in different rooms. I tried to shake it off as my imagination, but then I heard a whisper right by my ear. Not words, just a sound, like someone trying to get my attention. I've never packed up a box faster in my life. We loaded everything into Pastor's truck and took it to the church parking lot, where we burned it all in a metal barrel. The flames burned unusually high and changed colors, blues and greens mixed with the normal orange. None of us said it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. This was confirmation we were dealing with something truly evil. The next day was a Saturday. We'd arranged to meet at the church at noon for Valerie's deliverance. Only the deacons, Pastor Mitchell, Valerie, and Tom would be present. We'd prepared the sanctuary that morning, arranging chairs in a circle at the front, placing Bibles and water bottles nearby. Looking back, we were so naive about what we were about to face. Valerie arrived looking terrible. She was shaking, sweating, her eyes darting around the room like she was seeing things we couldn't. Tom had to practically carry her in. As soon as she crossed the threshold into the sanctuary, she started gagging. Pastor Mitchell began with prayer, asking for God's protection and guidance. We all joined hands, including Valerie, though her hand felt ice cold in mine. As Pastor started reading scriptures about Jesus casting out demons, Valerie's breathing changed. It became deeper, raspier. Then it happened. Pastor said, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command any unclean spirit to identify itself and leave this woman." Valerie's head snapped back, and she let out a sound I'll never forget. Not a scream, not a growl, but something in between, something that didn't sound human. Her eyes rolled back until only the whites showed. Then she started speaking in a voice that wasn't hers, deeper, with an accent I couldn't place. "She is ours," the voice said. "She has always been ours. For generations, her blood has served us." I nearly let go of her hand in shock, but Pastor Mitchell gave me a stern look that said, "Hold on." He continued quoting scripture, and Valerie, or whatever was speaking through her, became more agitated. Suddenly, she ripped her hands away from us and stood up. Remember, this was a tiny woman, maybe 100 pounds at most. But she picked up her chair, a heavy wooden church chair, and threw it across the room like it was made of paper. Then she turned to Bill, one of our strongest deacons, grabbed him by his shirt collar, and literally lifted him off the ground before throwing him several feet away. It took 4 of us to restrain her, and even then, she was unnaturally strong. Foam started coming from her mouth as she thrashed and screamed obscenities. I won't repeat here. Her voice kept changing, sometimes sounding like a man, sometimes like several people talking at once. Pastor Mitchell never faltered. He kept praying, commanding the spirits to leave in Jesus' name. This went on for hours. At one point, Valerie went completely limp and we thought it was over. Then she opened her eyes, looked directly at Pastor Mitchell and named a sin from his past that nobody in the church knew about, something he'd confessed to his wife years ago but had never told anyone else. The look on Pastor's face confirmed it was true, but instead of being rattled, Pastor Mitchell seemed to find new strength. He placed his hand on Valerie's forehead and shouted, "You have no power here. By the blood of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave this woman." Valerie's entire body went rigid, arching backward in a way that didn't seem physically possible. Then she collapsed completely. When she opened her eyes again, they were clear. She looked confused, exhausted, but present in a way she hadn't been for weeks. She weakly asked for water, and we all felt a collective sense of relief. It seemed to be over. We were wrong. 3 days later, Tom called Pastor in a panic. Their 10-year-old son was refusing to sleep in his room, claiming he saw shadows moving around at night. Pastor Mitchell and I went over immediately. The house felt different than before, lighter except for the boys' room. There, that same oppressive feeling lingered. Pastor asked if we'd missed anything when removing the occult items. Tom couldn't think of anything until his son mentioned the unicorn book he'd had since he was little. We searched the boys' bookshelf and found it, an innocent-looking children's book with a unicorn on the cover. But when we opened it, there were strange symbols drawn in the margins, and several pages had been marked with what looked like drops of dried blood. Apparently, Valerie had used this book in some ritual years ago, disguising it as a children's book to keep it hidden. We removed it and burned it that night. After that, the disturbances stopped completely. Valerie was able to attend church without getting sick. She gained weight, color returned to her face, and that haunted look in her eyes disappeared. It's been years now, and Valerie's still part of our congregation. She's one of the most devoted members we have, but none of us who were there that day will ever forget what we witnessed. It changed us, made the spiritual world more real than any sermon ever could. I don't talk about it much. Most people would think I'm crazy or making it up, but I know what I saw, what I heard, what I felt. Evil is real, but so is the power that overcomes it. Story 17. I've been trying to figure out how to write this without sounding completely nuts. I'm still not sure what happened at my mom's house last week, but I need to get it off my chest. I've been staying at a hotel since then, and my mom's been with my sister. Neither of us wants to go back yet. For some background, my mom's lived in the same house in Oakwood Hills for almost 20 years. It's a pretty normal-looking split level from the 70s, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, nothing special. But there's always been something off about it, little things at first, items that would move around when nobody was in the room, cold spots in the middle of summer, that kind of stuff. We started calling whatever it was Rosie about 15 years ago. It just felt right somehow. Rosie was never threatening. That's the thing I keep coming back to. For all these years, she's just been there, doing her thing. We'd joke about her when things went missing. Oh, Rosie must have borrowed my hairbrush again. Mom would roll her eyes when she heard footsteps in the upstairs hallway while we were both in the kitchen. Just Rosie going about her business. I usually pop over to Mom's place a couple times a week. She's in her 60s now, and since my stepdad passed away 3 years ago, I like to check in on her. Last Tuesday was supposed to be totally normal. I had the day off work and planned to help Mom clean out some of stepdad's old stuff from the garage. I have a key, so I let myself in around 9 in the morning. I called out Mom, but didn't get an answer. Her car was in the driveway, so I figured she was still sleeping. Mom's bedroom is in the basement. It stays cooler down there in the summer, and she likes it dark for sleeping. Stepdad was super sensitive to light when he was alive. He even put black electrical tape over the little power lights on the computer equipment. As I walked through the living room, I nearly jumped out of my skin. Mom was asleep on the couch, which was weird because she never sleeps anywhere but her bed. She's got a bad back and is really particular about her mattress. "Mom," I said, touching her shoulder gently. She startled awake, looking confused for a second before recognizing me. "Oh, Sarah, what time is it?" "Little after 9. Why are you sleeping out here? Is your back bothering you?" She sat up slowly, and I could tell right away something was off. Her eyes had dark circles under them, and her hands were shaking slightly as she pushed her hair back. "I couldn't stay down there last night," she said in a quiet voice. "There was something in my room." Now, we've joked about Rosie for years, but Mom's tone was different. She seemed genuinely rattled, which isn't like her at all. "What do you mean?" I asked, sitting down next to her. "I woke up around 2 in the morning," she said, rubbing her arms like she was cold despite it being mid-July. "I thought I heard something, but you know how the house settles. But then I saw it, a light over by my dresser. Like a flashlight? Did someone break in?" I immediately started thinking about checking the doors and windows. "No, nothing like that. It was..." She hesitated, like she was trying to find the right words. "It was a ball of light, about the size of a softball, just hovering there above my dresser." I frowned. Maybe headlights from the street? But even as I said it, I knew that wasn't possible. Mom's basement bedroom has one tiny window with blackout curtains. No light gets in there, that's why she likes it. "Sarah, I know what I saw," she said firmly. "It wasn't bright like a flashlight or headlights. It was dim, almost pulsing, and it moved when I sat up. Not fast, just drifted a little, like it was watching me." I felt a chill run down my spine. In all our years of Rosie's antics, we'd never seen anything like this. "How long did it stay?" I asked. "Maybe a minute? I don't know. I was too scared to look at my phone. When it started to move toward the bed, I just got up and ran upstairs. I've been on the couch ever since." Mom looked embarrassed, which broke my heart a little. She's always been the practical one, the one who explained away the weird stuff with logic. "Let's go check it out," I suggested, trying to sound braver than I felt. "It's daytime now. Whatever it was is probably gone." Mom nodded reluctantly, and we headed toward the basement stairs. The air felt heavier as we descended, but I told myself it was just the natural coolness of being below ground level. Her bedroom door was closed, which was strange because Mom always leaves it open for airflow. Neither of us mentioned it as we approached. My hand hesitated on the doorknob for just a second before I pushed it open. Everything looked normal at first glance. Mom's queen bed with the blue comforter, the dresser against the far wall, the small desk where she does crossword puzzles. The blackout curtains were closed, making the room dim despite it being morning, so I reached for the light switch. Nothing happened when I flipped it. "Bulb must be out," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. As the beam swept across the room, I noticed something odd. All the framed photos on Mom's dresser were face down, every single one. Pictures of me and my sister as kids, Mom and stepdad's wedding photo, even the old picture of Grandma. "Did you do this?" I asked Mom, who was still hovering in the doorway. She shook her head slowly. "No, they were normal when I went to bed. I went over to fix them, and that's when I noticed the temperature drop. It wasn't subtle. It was like walking into a freezer. My breath actually fogged in front of my face." "Do you feel that?" I whispered. Mom nodded, her eyes wide. "This is what happened before I saw the light. It got cold first." I quickly stood the frames back up, trying to ignore the way my fingers were going numb from the cold. As I set the last one upright, an old photo of me at my high school graduation, I saw something reflected in the glass, a dim yellowish light hovering just behind me. I spun around so fast I knocked one of the photos back over. There was nothing there, but the cold spot had moved. Now it was by the closet door, which was slightly ajar. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking, "was your closet door open last night?" "No," she said. "I always keep it closed. I don't know what possessed me to walk over to that closet. Maybe it was 20 years of Rosie being harmless, or maybe it was just that human need to know. Either way, I found myself standing in front of it, reaching out to pull the door open wider. The cold was intense now, making my teeth chatter. I pulled the door open with a quick yank. nothing but clothes and shoes. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Then I saw it, tucked in the back corner of the closet floor, a small circle of that same yellowish light, about the size of a quarter, shining up through the floorboards. "There's something under the floor," I said, pointing. Mom came closer, reluctantly. "That's impossible. It's concrete under the carpet." She was right. The basement floor was poured concrete. There shouldn't be any space underneath, and definitely no source of light. I knelt down, moving aside a few shoeboxes to get a better look. The light seemed to pulse slightly, growing a bit brighter as I got closer. Against all better judgment, I reached out toward it. The instant my fingers got within a few inches, the light shot upward, expanding into that softball-sized orb Mom had described. I fell backward, scrambling away as the glowing ball hovered at about eye level. It wasn't like any light I'd seen before. It didn't illuminate the room around it. It didn't cast shadows. It just existed, like a hole in reality that led somewhere else. And I swear it was aware of us. Mom was frozen in the doorway, her face pale. "That's it," she whispered. "That's what I saw." The orb drifted slowly toward her, and I could see it was leaving a faint trail in the air, like a smear on a camera lens. As it moved, I heard something that made my skin crawl. A soft, rhythmic sound, almost like breathing, but with a slight whistle to it. "Mom, get out," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Go upstairs." She didn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the light, which had stopped midway between us. "Mom," I said louder. The orb pulsed once, brightly, and Mom snapped out of whatever trance she was in. She backed into the hallway. I got to my feet, never taking my eyes off the light, and started inching toward the door. The breathing sound got louder, more ragged. The orb began to spin slowly, the yellow light taking on streaks of something darker, almost reddish. I made it to the doorway where Mom was waiting. We both backed up toward the stairs, watching as the orb drifted after us, maintaining the same distance. "What does it want?" Mom whispered. I shook my head. I had no idea, but every instinct was screaming at me to get out of that basement. We reached the bottom of the stairs, and I gently pushed Mom to go up first. As she turned to climb, the light suddenly shot forward, stopping just inches from my face. The cold was unbearable this close. My eyes watered and instantly started to sting. The breathing sound was all around me now, not coming from the orb, but seemingly from the walls themselves. And then I heard a voice, not out loud, but in my head, like a thought that wasn't mine. "Sarah." Just my name, but it sent waves of goosebumps across my skin. How did it know me? "What are you?" I whispered. The orb pulsed again, and an image flashed in my mind. The house, but different, older, with different people in it, a family, and something terrible happening to them. I must have made some sound because Mom called down from halfway up the stairs. "Sarah, come on." The vision vanished. The orb retreated a few feet, the reddish streaks fading back to yellow. I didn't wait around. I turned and ran up those stairs faster than I've ever moved. Mom was at the top, and together we rushed through the kitchen and out the front door into the blinding morning sunlight. We stood in the driveway, both breathing hard, looking back at the house. It appeared completely normal from the outside, just a regular suburban home with vinyl siding and a two-car garage. "We need to find out what that thing is," I said, after we'd caught our breath. Mom shook her head firmly. "No, we need to get out of here. I'm not going back in there." We ended up grabbing some essentials. Mom stayed in the car while I ran in and got her medication, some clothes, and her important papers. The light was gone, but the basement remained freezing cold, and that whispering breath seemed to follow me through the house. That was a week ago. We've been staying elsewhere since then. I've been researching the history of Mom's house, trying to find out if something happened there that might explain what we saw. So far, I haven't found anything concrete, but there are gaps in the property records from the late 1970s that make me suspicious. Whatever Rosie is, she's not the harmless presence we thought all these years. That light knew my name. It showed me something. A memory, a warning. I don't know. Mom's talking about selling the house, and I can't blame her. But part of me feels like we can't just pass this on to some unsuspecting family. We need to understand what's happening first. I still hear that whispering breath sometimes, right as I'm falling asleep. And twice now, I've woken up in the middle of the night to find my hotel room much colder than it should be. I think Rosie followed us. Story 18. I've never told this story to anyone other than my closest friends because it sounds so crazy. But I can't stop thinking about it and need to get it off my chest, so here goes. This happened about 3 years ago when I was living alone in my apartment in Ridgemont. It was a Friday evening in October, and I was completely worn out from a hellish work week. All I wanted was to veg out in front of the TV with some comfort food and not think about anything. I'd picked up Chinese takeout on the way home and settled in on my couch around 7 in the evening. I remember specifically putting on King of the Hill reruns because it's my go-to show when I'm stressed. Something about Hank Hill's monotone voice is weirdly soothing. I had my water bottle on the coffee table, my phone charging nearby, and was all set for a lazy night in. I must have nodded off around 9:30 or so. I remember it was the episode where Hank gets addicted to a video game. I was lying on my stomach, which isn't how I usually sleep, but I was just so tired I didn't bother moving to my bedroom. What happened next still makes my skin crawl when I think about it. I woke up, except I didn't really wake up. It's hard to explain if you've never experienced sleep paralysis before. I was conscious, aware of my surroundings, but completely unable to move. My eyes were open and I could see my living room exactly as it had been before I fell asleep. The TV was still on, still playing King of the Hill. I could hear Hank's voice, though it sounded slightly distorted, like someone had turned down the treble. The image on the screen was getting darker and blurrier around the edges too, but I could still make out what was happening. The scariest part of sleep paralysis is the absolute inability to move. I tried to lift my head, move my arms, anything, but it was like my body weighed 1,000 pounds. I could only move my eyes, darting them around the room. Everything looked normal, exactly as I'd left it before falling asleep. My water bottle on the table, the takeout containers, my phone. But something felt wrong. Heavy, like the air had thickened. That's when I felt it. Something was behind me. Not just behind me on the couch, but on me. I felt pressure points on my back, like fingers or knuckles pressing into me. At first, I thought maybe it was just part of the dream. But then the pressure started moving, poking, prodding, like something was testing me. Pure terror washed over me. I've never felt fear like that before. It was primal, raw, and overwhelming. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I couldn't even breathe properly. All I could do was lie there while this thing touched me. In my head, I was screaming at myself to move. Turn over. You need to turn over now. Over and over, I repeated it like a mantra. Move, move, move. The pressure on my back intensified. Whatever it was getting more aggressive, more deliberate in its movements. I could feel individual pokes traveling up my spine, then across my shoulders. It wasn't random. It felt purposeful, like it was examining me. I focused every ounce of willpower on moving my left arm, just that one limb. Nothing else mattered, just move that arm. After what felt like an eternity of straining, I felt the slightest twitch in my fingers. That tiny movement gave me hope, and I channeled all my fear and adrenaline into that arm. Finally, my arm jerked in a wild, uncoordinated punching motion. It wasn't graceful, but it was movement. That break in the paralysis was all I needed. With one tremendous effort, I managed to twist my body, rolling from my stomach onto my back, and that's when I saw it. For just a split second before I fully woke up, I saw something standing over me. It wasn't fully solid, more like a disturbance in the air. The best way I can describe it is like heat waves rising from hot pavement, but darker and more defined. It had a vaguely humanoid shape, but blurry and vibrating, like its edges couldn't stay still. It reminded me of how invisibility is portrayed in movies. You know, that wavy, transparent effect, like Harry Potter's invisibility cloak, but darker and more substantial. The moment I registered what I was seeing, the thing reacted. It seemed startled that I could see it. In an instant, it shot backward, moving impossibly fast, and disappeared through my hallway. I sat bolt upright, gasping for air, fully awake now. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I was drenched in sweat, shaking uncontrollably. The TV was still on, the exact same episode was playing, my water bottle was in the same place, everything was exactly as it had been in my dream. That's what made it so terrifying. The perfect continuity between my sleep state and reality. There was no disorientation, no moment of, oh, it was just a dream. The room I dreamed about and the room I woke up in were identical in every detail. I jumped up and turned on every light in the apartment, checked every room, every closet, behind every door. Nothing. Of course there was nothing. Whatever I'd seen wasn't something that would hide in a closet. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. Couldn't. I sat up watching infomercials with all the lights on until the sun came up. Even then, I didn't feel safe. For weeks afterward, I crashed at friends' places, making up excuses about plumbing problems or noisy neighbors. I couldn't bring myself to sleep in my own apartment. When I finally did return, I rearranged all my furniture and slept with a nightlight for months. I still can't sleep on my stomach. The rational part of my brain says it was just sleep paralysis. I've read about it since then, how your mind wakes up before your body, how it often comes with hallucinations and a sense of a malevolent presence. The feeling of being watched or touched is apparently common. Science says it's just misfiring neurons, a glitch in the transition between sleep states. But here's the thing, I've had regular nightmares before. I know what those feel like. This was different. The clarity of it, the perfect match between my sleeping and waking environments, the way that thing moved when it realized I could see it. It felt real in a way that nightmares don't. What still haunts me is how that entity seemed aware of me. It wasn't just a random hallucination. It was interacting with me, examining me. And when I broke free of the paralysis and saw it, it reacted. It fled. Like it had been caught doing something it shouldn't. I've tried to convince myself it was just my imagination, just a particularly vivid episode of sleep paralysis. Most days, I almost believe that. But sometimes when I'm home alone at night and the apartment gets quiet, I swear I can feel something watching me, waiting for me to fall asleep again. The worst part is not knowing for sure. Was it really just my brain playing tricks on me? Or was something actually there that night? Something that normally stays hidden from view, but that I accidentally glimpsed during that vulnerable state between sleeping and waking. I still watch King of the Hill sometimes, but only during daylight hours, and I always sleep on my back now, facing the door, just in case. I don't know what that vibrating shadow-like thing was. I don't know if it was real or a hallucination, but I know what I experienced, and I know the fear I felt was absolutely real. Sometimes I wonder if it's still around, invisible most of the time, but watching, waiting for me to be vulnerable again. Has anyone else ever experienced anything like this? Sometimes I think I'm going crazy, but I know what I saw. That thing was there. It was touching me. And when I caught it, it ran. What kind of hallucination does that? Story 19. I still don't know how to explain what happened that night. I've gone over it 1,000 times in my head, tried to find logical explanations, but nothing makes sense. I'm not the type who believes in ghosts or anything supernatural. At least I wasn't before. But after what happened at Kayla's house last year, I'm not so sure anymore. It was just a normal Friday night in Bayview. You know how it is in these small coastal towns. Not much to do except hang out at someone's house or go to the beach. Kayla had invited me over for a sleepover, something we did pretty regularly. Her parents were cool and usually left us alone to watch movies, eat junk food, and just chill in her room. I arrived around 7. We ordered pizza and started watching some stupid reality show on Netflix while we waited for it to arrive. Nothing out of the ordinary. After dinner, we went up to her room, and that's when things started to get weird. Kayla has always been into paranormal stuff. She watches all those ghost hunter shows, has books about haunted places, and is always telling me stories about people who've had supernatural experiences. I never really bought into it. I'd nod and smile while thinking she was being dramatic. That night, though, she was extra hyped about it all. "Jess, you know my cousin who lives in that old house in Cedar Falls?" she asked, sitting cross-legged on her bed. "She told me they've been hearing footsteps at night when everyone's asleep and things keep moving around." "Uh-huh," I mumbled, scrolling through TikTok. "Maybe they just have mice or something." "No, seriously." She grabbed my phone from my hands. She said they found all the kitchen cabinets open one morning, all of them, and no one did it. I shrugged. "Maybe someone sleepwalks." "God, you're such a skeptic," she said, rolling her eyes. "Don't you ever wonder if there's more out there, things we can't explain?" "Not really," I admitted. But I could see she was getting annoyed with my lack of enthusiasm, so I decided to play along. "Fine. What do you want to do? Break out a Ouija board or something?" Her eyes lit up. "I don't have one, but we don't need it. We can try to communicate with spirits right here." I laughed. "Kayla, come on." "No, seriously, it's easy. You just have to invite them in." That phrase, "invite them in," still makes my skin crawl when I think about it now. "Whatever, go for it," I said, leaning back against her pillows. Kayla dimmed her lights and sat in the middle of her room. She closed her eyes and started speaking in this weird, formal voice. "If there are any spirits here with us tonight, we welcome you. You can show us a sign that you're here." I stifled a laugh. The whole thing felt so ridiculous, like we were 12-year-olds at a slumber party instead of 17-year-olds who should know better. "Jess, you try," she urged. "This is stupid," I muttered, but I cleared my throat and said in my most dramatic voice, "Hey ghosts, if you're around, feel free to, I don't know, knock something over or whatever." We both giggled, but our laughter cut off instantly when Kayla's water bottle, which had been sitting on her desk, suddenly fell to the floor with a loud clatter. My heart jumped into my throat. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Kayla's eyes were wide. "I told you," she whispered back excitedly. "That doesn't mean anything," I said quickly. It was probably just balanced weirdly. But I couldn't shake the unsettling feeling that crept over me. The timing was just too perfect. As if responding to my thoughts, the lamp on her bedside table flickered, just once, but definitely noticeable. "Holy shit," Kayla breathed. "Did you see that?" "It's an old house," I said, trying to sound rational even as my heart pounded. "Electrical issues." But Kayla was beyond listening to reason now. She was practically vibrating with excitement. "This is amazing. Let's keep going." Before I could stop her, she was talking again, louder this time. "Thank you for showing us you're here. We give you permission to communicate with us. You can touch us if you want. Let us know you're real." "Kayla, stop," I said sharply. The air in the room felt different somehow, heavier, colder. I didn't like it. "This isn't funny anymore." "Don't be scared," she said, grinning at me. "They're just curious about us, like we are about them." "Well, I'm not curious," I said firmly. "Can we just watch a movie or something?" Kayla looked disappointed but nodded. "Fine, scaredy cat. But this is so cool. I've never had anything respond before." I tried to brush it off as we switched to watching some horror movie on her laptop, her pick, of course. But I couldn't concentrate. Every little sound made me jump, and I kept feeling like something was watching us from the corners of the room. I told myself it was just the power of suggestion. Kayla had put these ideas in my head, and now my imagination was running wild. By the time the movie ended around midnight, I'd almost convinced myself that nothing weird had happened. The water bottle had fallen because it was unbalanced. The light had flickered because of bad wiring. Everything had a logical explanation. "I should head home," I told Kayla, gathering my stuff. My house was just 2 blocks away, and my parents were fine with me walking back as long as it wasn't too late. "You sure you don't want to try talking to the spirits again?" Kayla teased as she walked me downstairs. Absolutely not, I said firmly, and maybe you shouldn't either. She just laughed. You're no fun, Jess. The walk home was uneventful. The night was clear, and even though it was chilly, I enjoyed the fresh air. It helped clear my head of all the ghost nonsense. By the time I got home, showered, and crawled into bed, I wasn't thinking about anything supernatural. I was just tired and ready to sleep. I woke up the next morning around 10. My parents had already left for my little brother's soccer game, so the house was quiet. As I stretched, I felt a dull ache in my right forearm. I rubbed at it absently, figuring I'd slept on it wrong or something. It happens sometimes. You wake up with a random ache or pain that disappears after a few minutes, except this one didn't disappear. If anything, it got worse as the morning went on. It was a strange, burning sensation just below my elbow. I took some Advil with breakfast, thinking it would help, but it didn't really do much. Around noon, I decided to change out of my pajamas. I pulled off my long-sleeved sleep shirt, and that's when I saw it, and I swear my heart stopped for a second. There were 3 long red scratches running down my forearm, from just below my elbow almost to my wrist. They weren't deep, but they were definitely noticeable. And surrounding them was a pattern of small, purplish bruises, like someone had grabbed my arm really hard with their fingers. I stood there staring at my arm, trying to remember how I could have gotten these marks. Had I scratched myself in my sleep? But the placement was awkward. It would be hard to reach that part of my arm with my other hand at that angle, and it didn't explain the bruises. Had I hit my arm on something at Kayla's house? I racked my brain but couldn't remember any incident. We hadn't done anything physical, just sat around talking and watching the movie. Besides, I would have noticed marks like these last night when I showered. With shaking hands, I grabbed my phone and texted Kayla. Hey, weird question, but did I hurt my arm somehow at your place last night? She responded almost immediately. Not that I saw. Why? I snapped a picture of my arm and sent it to her. 3 dots appeared as she typed, disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, WTF? Where did that come from? I don't know, I typed back. Woke up with it. It wasn't there last night. There was a pause, then. OMG, Jess, you don't think? I knew exactly what she was thinking, and my stomach clenched. Don't, I texted back. Don't even say it. But we invited them to touch us. What if something actually came through? I felt sick. The memory of Kayla's words flashed through my mind. You can touch us if you want. Let us know you're real. That's insane, I replied. There has to be a normal explanation. But even as I typed those words, I didn't believe them. The scratches looked deliberate. The bruises were in the shape of fingertips, and they'd appeared overnight, after a night where we'd literally invited spirits to make contact with us. I've never been so terrified in my life. I sat on my bed, staring at my arm, wondering what the hell had happened to me while I slept. Had something followed me home from Kayla's house? Was it still here, watching me? I spent the rest of the day jumping at every sound, checking over my shoulder constantly. When my parents got home, I wore a long-sleeved shirt so they wouldn't see the marks and ask questions. What would I even tell them? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept all the lights on in my room and played videos on my phone to drown out any strange sounds. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jerk awake, convinced something was in the room with me. The scratches and bruises faded after about a week. Physically, everything went back to normal. But mentally, I haven't been the same since. I've never gone to another sleepover at Kayla's house. We're still friends, but I make excuses whenever she suggests I stay over. She thinks I'm being ridiculous, but she didn't wake up with unexplained marks on her body. It's been over a year now and I still sleep with a small light on. I still check under my bed and in my closet before I go to sleep, like a little kid afraid of monsters. Because that's the thing. I am afraid of monsters now. Or whatever it was that left those marks on my arm. I don't know what happened that night. Maybe there's a logical explanation that I just haven't figured out yet. But deep down, I believe something responded when we invited it in, something that followed me home and marked me while I slept. And the worst part? I don't know if it's still with me, waiting for another chance to make contact. All I know is that I'll never again casually invite the unknown into my life. Some doors, once opened, can't be easily closed. Story 20. I still get chills when I think about what happened back in 2015. It's been nearly a decade, but I remember it like it was yesterday. My girlfriend, who's now my wife, my mom and I were helping my buddy Mike move into this apartment building in downtown Portland. Mike had found this decent place on the second floor of this older 12-story building. Nothing fancy, but the rent was good and the location was perfect for his new job. We'd rented a U-Haul for the day and were making trips back and forth between the truck and the building. It was one of those exhausting moving days. You know, when your back is killing you by noon and you're already regretting offering to help. My girlfriend and I actually lived in the same building, up on the 10th floor, which is part of why Mike wanted to move there. We'd been there about 8 months already and liked it fine enough. The building was from the 70s, with those long hallways that always smell vaguely of carpet cleaner and old cigarettes, no matter how many times they shampooed the carpets. To make the move more efficient, we were leaving doors unlocked between trips. Mike's apartment door, our apartment door, even the stairwell doors we were propping open with random objects. The elevator was painfully slow, so we were taking the stairs most of the time. My mum was helping out too. She'd driven in from Eugene that morning to lend a hand. Around 3 in the afternoon, I think, Mum and I had gone down to grab more boxes from the U-Haul. We'd left my girlfriend and Mike upstairs sorting through kitchen stuff. The weather was hot as hell that day, and I remember feeling sweat running down my back as we carried a couple of heavy boxes of books back into the building. We climbed the 2 flights to Mike's floor, huffing and puffing the whole way. When we got to his door, I went to push it open with my foot, since my hands were full, but it didn't budge. The door was locked. "That's weird," I said to Mom. "Mike must have locked it by accident." I set down my box and knocked. No answer. I knocked again, louder this time. "Mike, hey, you in there? Door's locked," I called out. Still nothing. I looked at my mom and shrugged. Maybe they went to our place to grab something. "Or maybe they can't hear you over unpacking noise," Mom suggested, always the practical one. I knocked a 3rd time, really pounding on the door now. "Mike, open up, man." And that's when it happened. The doorknob started to shake, not just a little jiggle like someone was about to open it. This was violent, frantic rattling, like someone on the other side was trying desperately to either lock or unlock it. The entire door was visibly shaking in its frame. It was so forceful that I actually took a step back, thinking whoever was on the other side was about to yank it open. But the door never opened. And the weirdest part, there was complete silence otherwise. No footsteps, no voice asking, "Who is it?" Nothing but the sound of that doorknob violently rattling. This went on for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, which doesn't sound long, but trust me, when you're standing there watching a doorknob go crazy, it feels like forever. Then it just stopped, as suddenly as it had started. I looked at my mom and her face had gone completely white. "What the hell was that?" she whispered. "Mike," I called again, softer this time. No answer. Just silence. A chill ran through me despite the heat. Something felt off, really off. Let's just leave these boxes here and go check our apartment," I said to Mom, trying to sound casual. "Maybe they went up there." She nodded quickly, clearly as unsettled as I was. We left the boxes outside Mike's door and headed for the stairs. Neither of us said anything as we climbed the 8 flights to our floor, but I could feel my heart pounding. Not from the exertion, from whatever the hell had just happened. When we reached our apartment, the door was unlocked just as we'd left it. I pushed it open to find Mike and my girlfriend sitting on our couch, laughing about something and drinking beers from our fridge. They looked up when we came in, totally relaxed, totally normal. "Hey guys," my girlfriend said. "We got tired of unpacking kitchen stuff, so we came up here to take a break." I just stood there, staring at them. "How long have you been here?" Mike checked his phone. "I don't know, like 20 minutes maybe. We finished those boxes of dishes and decided we needed a beer break." 20 minutes. They'd been up here for 20 minutes. "So, who's in your apartment?" I asked Mike slowly. He looked confused. "What do you mean?" Nobody. We locked it before coming up here. You locked it. My mom's voice was higher than normal. Are you sure? Yeah, force of habit, I guess, Mike shrugged. Why? What's going on? My mom and I exchanged glances. I could see she was thinking the same thing I was. If Mike and my girlfriend had been up here for 20 minutes and they'd locked the apartment door before leaving. Who the hell was shaking that doorknob? I explained what had happened, trying to describe how violent and deliberate the rattling had been. My girlfriend looked concerned, but Mike just laughed. Probably the building settling or something, he said. This place is old. No, my mom said firmly. Buildings settling don't make doorknobs shake like that. Someone was in there trying to get out, or trying to keep us from getting in. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Well, let's go check it out, my girlfriend finally said. Always the brave one. We can all go together. So that's what we did. The four of us walked down to the second floor, me leading the way, trying to act like this was no big deal, while my mind raced through possibilities. Maybe a maintenance person had gone in, but Mike said he'd locked the door, and why wouldn't they have answered when we knocked? When we reached Mike's door, the boxes we'd left were still sitting outside, untouched. Mike pulled out his key, but before using it, he tried the handle. It turned easily. The door was unlocked. We all looked at each other. I swear I locked it, Mike said, his cocky certainty from earlier fading. We went inside and checked the entire apartment. All the closets, the bathroom, under the bed, behind the shower curtain. It was completely empty except for the boxes we'd already moved in. No signs that anyone had been there. No windows open, nothing disturbed. See? Nothing, Mike said, but his voice was tense now. Must have been some weird draft or something. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd heard. That doorknob had been moving with purpose, with urgency, like someone or something was desperately trying to manipulate it. We continued with the move that day, but there was a weird energy between all of us. My mom kept glancing at doorknobs whenever we passed them. I found myself listening for unexplained noises. Only Mike seemed determined to brush it off, making jokes about ghost movers who might help us finish faster. That night, after everything was moved in and Mike was settled, my mom, my girlfriend, and I sat in our apartment talking about it. I've never seen anything like that, Mom said. That wasn't natural. That was something else. My girlfriend, who hadn't witnessed it, was fascinated but skeptical. Could it have been someone trying to break in who ran when they heard you? But we didn't hear anyone, I explained for the 100th time. No footsteps, no sounds at all except the doorknob. And if someone was trying to break in, why would they shake the knob from the inside? We went around and around about it, constructing and dismissing theories. Carbon monoxide? The building didn't have gas, a practical joke. But who would have done it, and how would they have disappeared? Some weird air pressure phenomenon. But doorknobs don't shake that violently from air pressure. Over the years, we've talked about it many times. My mom and I never wavered in what we experienced. Mike lived in that apartment for over 2 years and never reported anything strange happening there. But whenever we visited him, I always felt uncomfortable, always kept an eye on that doorknob. I've looked up similar experiences online, read about poltergeist phenomena and residual hauntings. Nothing quite matches what we experienced. It was so specific, so isolated, yet so undeniably real. My wife, we got married the year after, sometimes teases me about it, but even she admits there's no logical explanation. The rational part of my brain wants to believe there's some simple answer we're overlooking. But then I remember the look on my mom's face that day, the absolute certainty we both felt that something inexplicable was happening right in front of us. Mike moved out years ago, and we eventually left that building too. But sometimes I still dream about it, that violent, desperate rattling like something was trying to communicate or escape or maybe warn us. And the worst part, to this day, I still have no idea what it was trying to say. Story 21. I still get goosebumps thinking about what happened that summer day when I was 10. It's been 20 years, but I remember it like it was yesterday. The memory is burned into my brain, that thing in the woods watching me. I grew up in rural Maine, about an hour northwest of Bangor, in a place most people have never heard of. Our house sat at the end of a dirt road surrounded by dense pine forest. It was the kind of isolation where your closest neighbor was half a mile away, and you knew everyone within a 5-mile radius because there weren't many of us. Growing up in the backwoods, I was used to the sounds of the forest, the coyotes howling at night, owls hooting, and the rustling of nocturnal creatures were just the soundtrack to my childhood. My parents always warned me about wandering too far into the woods alone. Bears, moose, and getting lost were real concerns. I wasn't a fearful kid, but I respected the dangers of the wilderness. That day in early July was hot and humid, typical Maine summer weather. School had been out for a couple weeks, and I was bored out of my mind. My friend Tommy was supposed to come over, but his mom needed him to help with chores. With nothing better to do, I decided to ride my bike down our road. I remember riding past the cluster of mailboxes where our dirt road met the paved county road. I turned around at that point usually, but that day I decided to explore the other direction, toward what locals called the old section. It was just a dead-end stretch with 3 houses: my Uncle Pete's place, the abandoned Wilkins property, and Old Man Hargrove's cabin. It was around 3 in the afternoon. The sun was still high, filtered through the pine trees that lined both sides of the road. I was just casually pedaling, enjoying the shade and the slight breeze against my sweaty face. I remember feeling peaceful, watching dust kick up from my tires and listening to the sound of cicadas in the trees. That's when it happened. I got this sudden, overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. It wasn't like when you think someone might be looking at you. This was intense, like prey being stalked. The hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I felt a cold sensation wash over me despite the summer heat. Something inside me, instinct I guess, made me look toward the pine woods on my right. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just the dark green of the trees and the shadows between them. But then I noticed movement behind one of the larger pines, about 30 feet into the forest. I slowed my bike a little, squinting to see better. That's when I saw it. This black, shiny thing peering from behind the tree. I can't really describe it properly, even after all these years. It wasn't exactly a head, but it had what looked like eyes. Not normal eyes, but areas that were slightly lighter than the rest of it. The thing was dark, almost like liquid oil, but it held its shape. I remember thinking it looked like primordial ooze, like something from a science fiction movie. But this was real. When it realized I had spotted it, it didn't retreat or charge. It just adjusted, like it was studying my reaction. That's when I got really scared. I started pedaling faster, not taking my eyes off the woods. The thing moved when I did. It darted from behind that pine tree to another one, keeping pace with me. It didn't move like any animal I'd ever seen, not like a bear or a moose or anything natural. It flowed between the trees, almost like it was partially solid and partially liquid at the same time. It wasn't running on legs. It was just moving, sliding, flowing, but with purpose. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I was pedaling as fast as I could, but I kept looking into the woods, and every time I did, that thing was there, matching my speed, tree to tree, keeping perfect pace with me. I remember the confusion and terror mixing together. In my 10-year-old mind, I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. Was it a person in some kind of suit? A bear with some disease that made it look weird? But deep down, I knew it wasn't anything I could explain. The worst part was how it moved, totally silent, effortless, and it kept those lighter spots, those eyes fixed on me the entire time. I had the distinct feeling it was deciding whether to chase me directly or continue this predatory parallel tracking. As I approached my Uncle Pete's house on the left side of the road, I made a split-second decision. I was about 50 yards from his driveway when I saw the thing dart behind a tree much closer to the road's edge. It was closing the distance between us. I ditched my bike right there on the road and sprinted toward Uncle Pete's house. I didn't look back. I was too scared of what I might see. I ran up his gravel driveway, stumbling once and scraping my knee, but the pain didn't even register. I just scrambled back up and kept running. I remember pounding on his door with both fists, yelling his name over and over. Those seconds waiting for him to answer felt like hours. I kept expecting to feel something cold and wet grab me from behind. When Uncle Pete finally opened the door, I practically fell inside. I was hyperventilating, trying to explain what happened between gasps. There's something in the woods following me, black, not normal. Uncle Pete was a big man, over 6 feet tall, with a beard and calloused hands from years of working as a logger. He wasn't easily rattled, but when I managed to describe what I'd seen, something changed in his expression. It wasn't disbelief, it was recognition, and that scared me even more. "Where'd you see it?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. I pointed toward the road, all along the trees. It followed me from the mailboxes. "It's not a person, Uncle Pete. It's not an animal either." He walked to the gun cabinet in his living room and took out his hunting rifle. "Probably just a bear," he said, but his tone didn't match his words. There was tension in his voice that I'd never heard before. "Bears don't move like that," I insisted. It was like black jelly, but fast, and it was watching me. Uncle Pete loaded the rifle and looked me straight in the eyes. "Yep, they'll do that sometimes," he said, but he wasn't really responding to what I'd said. It was like he was trying to convince himself of something. He went to the window and scanned the tree line carefully, methodically. His knuckles were white around the rifle. After a minute or two, he pulled the curtains closed. "Where's your bike?" he asked. "I left it on the road," I told him. I was too scared. He nodded. "I'll drive you home. We'll pick up your bike on the way." When we went outside, Uncle Pete kept the rifle ready. He walked me to his truck, looking around constantly. We drove the short distance to where I'd abandoned my bike. It was still there, lying on its side in the middle of the road. Uncle Pete stopped the truck but kept the engine running. "Stay here," he instructed. He got out, quickly grabbed my bike and tossed it in the truck bed. As he did this, I noticed him staring into the woods at almost exactly the spot where I'd last seen the thing. On the drive to my house, Uncle Pete was quiet. Too quiet. When we arrived, he told me to go inside while he talked to my parents. I couldn't hear what they discussed, but my mom kept looking at me with concern, and my dad's face grew serious. That evening, my dad told me I shouldn't go bike riding alone for a while. He claimed it was because of increased bear activity, but I knew better. Whatever I saw, it wasn't a bear, and somehow they all knew it. The strangest part came a few days later when I overheard my parents talking with Uncle Pete in our kitchen. I was supposed to be in bed, but I snuck to the top of the stairs to listen. "It's back then," my dad said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Looks that way," Uncle Pete replied. "First time since '87. "Should we tell the Hargroves? The Wilkins place is empty now, but Hargrove's still out there," my mom said. "I'll talk to him," Uncle Pete said. "But you know how he is. Stubborn old coot probably won't leave even if that thing was sitting on his porch." "What about Nathan?" my mom asked. He saw it clearly. There was a pause before Uncle Pete answered. "Kids are resilient. He'll convince himself it was something else eventually. Better that way." But I never convinced myself it was something else. For weeks afterward, I had nightmares about that thing chasing me. I refused to go near that stretch of road alone. When school started in the fall, I took the long way around to catch the bus, adding 20 minutes to my walk each way. The adults never spoke to me directly about what happened. When I tried to bring it up with Uncle Pete a month later, he changed the subject. When I asked my parents about the thing from '87 they mentioned to Uncle Pete, they acted like they didn't know what I was talking about. Life eventually returned to normal, or what passed for normal. I grew up, graduated high school, and moved to Portland for college. I visit my parents a few times a year, but I never stay after dark. I make sure I'm on the highway before the sun sets. Uncle Pete died of a heart attack 5 years ago. We weren't close in my teen years. I was angry that he wouldn't tell me the truth. But I still regret not asking him again, as an adult, what he knew about that thing in the woods. Sometimes I think about reaching out to Old Man Hargrove, if he's still alive. He'd be in his 80s now. Maybe he knows something. Or maybe I should dig through the local newspaper archives to see what happened in 1987 that had them all so worried. All I know is that 20 years later, I still can't explain what I saw in those Maine woods. It wasn't a bear, a moose, or any known animal. It wasn't a person. It was something else, something that didn't belong in our world, but was there anyway. Something that my uncle and parents recognized but refused to name. Whatever it was, I'm certain it's still out there, moving silently between the pines, watching and waiting for someone else to notice it. And sometimes on nights when I can't sleep, I wonder if it remembers me too.